Good evening and welcome everyone to the Housing and Community Select Committee. My name is Councillor Kasim Ali and I'm the chair for the Select Committee. This meeting is held in accordance with the government's new regulations to hold virtual meetings due to COVID-19, and this meeting is held via Microsoft Teams. And all the committee members and officers and the parties who wish to participate can join remotely at this meeting. The event is being live streamed, as I said, for the members and the public and the media are welcome to follow us to the meeting remotely and listen and take part in the discussions. I would like to welcome the viewers who are new to the Housing and Community Select Committee. But before I start anything else with this meeting, we all know Grenfell disaster was a housing disaster, and I believe it will be appropriate to start with 72 seconds silence to remember everyone who have lost their lives in this Grenfell tragedy. We will now start the 72-second silence.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ryan and Tom. Before we proceed to this meeting, I would like members of the committee members to mute their microphones and unmute themselves when they are addressing the meeting. Once they have done, they can unmute or talk. And likewise, to save the bandwidth, please, councillors, switch off your cameras and only switch it on to confirm and also to speak when you are speaking. And once you are done with that, please switch off the cameras again. If a councillor wishes to speak on a particular agenda or a particular item on the agenda, please write letter Q in the conversation column and to draw our attention to me and the team that's supporting me with the virtual meeting. Please note that if you write more information or more details on the chat section, this will be seen by everyone. And for councillors and the benefit for those who are not watching this program, or maybe those who are watching on other channels, it will be good just to write a Q and not to write more questions or details, and you will be given the opportunity to speak at the meeting so that everyone can hear your comments. I would now like to call the members who are present at the meeting. We'll start with Councillor Hamish Odorian. Please say your name and switch on your cameras and then switch it off.
Hello, good evening everyone. I'm Councillor Hamish Odorian.
Thank you. Councillor Mo Bakhtiar, Mohammed Bakhtiar.
Good evening everyone. This is Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar, a member of this committee.
Thank you. Councillor Tom Bennett.
Good evening, everyone. Councillor Tom Bennett here.
Councillor Robert Freeman.
Robert Freeman present.
Councillor Greg Hammond.
I'm here, Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Dori Schmatlin.
Good evening. This is Dori Schmetterling. As you can see, I'm present.
Thank you, councillors. And as you can also see, I'm here as the chair of the Housing and Select Committee, and I have no interest to declare apart from having attendance for the local local authority owned property. And now I would like to start with apologies, but we have all the members of the selection committee present. Therefore, there is no need for an apology to go through. So declaration of interest, I will start with myself. Any councillor who wants to declare interest, please speak up now. Well, your silence says there's no interest.
This is Dorish Metterling. I have no declaration to make.
Thank you. Thank you, Dorish Metterling. No interest to declare, and the silence of all other selected committees, I will take it as no interest to declare. On this A3, we have the minutes of the last meeting that's held July the 20th, 2020. I would like the committee to agree the minutes as has been circulated before, that they are the correct record, and I will be happy to sign, or will be happy to sign as the corrected record.
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Thank you very much, Tim. Select Committee, thank you once again for that declaration. A4, the Select Committee work program. This is a fantastic opportunity for us to look into what we have for the year coming, and I will give you just a brief background of what we have been doing, and also I will welcome shortly to give us another update if there's anything new to add. Jackie, who is the manager and who's been really very supportive and been supporting us, and not only the Housing and Community Select Committee, but all other scrutiny committees. And I would like to thank her in advance, her and her team, for the work that we've been doing, and hopefully the work that we'll be continuing to do. This is the work program. As you can see, the work program has been delayed due to COVID-19 restrictions and COVID-19 pandemic. We will have probably 6 to 8 months of work to be done for the next 6 to 8 months. And we have been contacting with our committee members, residents in RVKC, and also councillors and RA chairs, people who were interested in to contribute to the work program that we want to take forward for the next 6 to 8 months. Without further ado, I would like to call Jackie to give us a roundup for this topic before I open the platform to the Select Committee, as well as of backbench councillors and rest of the public who are interested to have their say, because we will be all doing this together to scrutinize and hold the leadership accountable, as well as provide and engaging with them, as well as providing advice and guidance where necessary, so that we can have a best place to live, work and study for our residents. Jackie, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Over the summer, the scrutiny councillors have been developing their work programme. So as the Chair has set out, there's been wide consultation with councillors, residents and partner organisations. And at the overview and scrutiny meeting on the 24th of September, councillors decided the work programme for each of the committees. They decided that according to the criteria set out in statutory guidance, as well as best practice promulgated by the Centre for Public Scrutiny. So councillors were looking at those areas where they thought they could make an impact or add value, trying to get a balance between pre-decision scrutiny, i.e. before decisions are made, holding to account, and also policy development, and also looking to get a spread of items over the year. So councillors have obviously been mindful of their capacity to deliver the work programme. So the report sets out the topics which were agreed for this committee, and they were communities, Grenfell recovery and COVID recovery, a housing topic looking at healthy homes, and then some housing management topics, repairs and other general housing management, including illegal subletting and antisocial behaviour. So at this meeting, the councillors will be agreeing, or talking about, the committee will be agreeing how they're going to carry out each of these reviews. So will it be a working group, report to a meeting, and who from the committee will be involved in each review and take a lead on it. So I'll hand it back to you, Chair. Thank you.
You're on mute, Chair.
Thank you, Mo and Tom. Thank you, Jackie, for that update. And I think what we need to move on now to decide is which group, how we're going to scrutinize, and also to go into the details of the scope of the work that is required to be done. As Jackie mentioned, communities will be Grenfell recovery and COVID-19 recovery, housing safety, as well as fire and building safety, drug dealing, antisocial behavior, housing management will be the repair side of things, as well as illegal subletting. And also another point in the agenda will be housing, social housing, which we could take it into the next level of providing new homes for our residents. Selected committee will now have to decide how we're going to carry on this scrutiny committee and talk about how we will do it. Shall we do it as an agenda item on our ordinary meeting? Shall we do it as a single issue committee meeting, or shall we do it a long-term detailed scrutiny in the form of a working group lasting over a few months, 5 to 6 months if we require, or shall we do it all the above, a mixture of all the above? I think it's about time for us to decide the way forward this evening and to bring a world-class, I would say, scrutiny for our residents and to the people who are looking forward to the policies that can benefit them rather than hinder their progress in life. So without further ado, we have the topic 1, and that is Grenfell recovery and COVID-19 community. This is COVID-19 recovery. This is recommended as a working group. And I know in the past I have had discussions with select committee members, and they have suggested the areas of interest. And I'm pleased to say that Councillor Robert Freeman had interest in the communities, and we had a chat about if he were to lead this community working group for the Grenfell recovery and COVID-19 working group. And I think it will be brilliant. So if I may start, if his interest is still on, we'll start with Councillor Robert Freeman. And also, if you're not willing to go first, other councillors can get involved, other committee members. But it will be good to start with this topic 1 and decide who's going to lead the work as the chair of the working group. Discussion is open for us. Anyone to? I somehow cannot see anyone raise their hand. Can someone raise their hand to see if I can?
Shall I raise my hand? I'd be absolutely delighted to do it. And thank you very much for asking me.
Thank you, Councillor Freeman. And it will be wonderful for you, for all of us to work with you on this. And hopefully there will be other committee members who will be joining you, other select committee members who are willing to go into the working group for Grenfell, as well as Grenfell recovery, as well as COVID-19 recovery. And yes, I have been, for your information, Councillor Freeman, I have been attending now every 2 weeks meeting for community resilience group that has been dealing with COVID-19 and how to support the communities. And we will hopefully in time with the lead member to invite you to that meeting, you and anyone else who will be interested, so that you can look into what the community has been doing and the ways to improve, hopefully during this pandemic, as well as what is going to happen after this pandemic. Yes, Councillor Greg Hammond, you next in line. I think you've raised your hand.
Well, thank you, Chair. I did raise my hand because I think you were looking for a hand to be raised so you could see one. But I will make one point, and that's, of course, that there are some elements of what we're going to be discussing tonight that really have to be done in the main committee meeting because they're of such overriding importance. Some of the Grenfell things that we're going to be going on to discuss tonight. But obviously there's a level of detail below that I think on both COVID and Grenfell that would be ideal for the working group, and I welcome Robert's volunteering to lead that. So it was more about putting a hand up because you needed somebody to put a hand up there.
Thank you, and you have a wonderful contribution on that sense. I appreciate that. If I can go back from here. Just wait to see the agenda on my screen. yes, any other councillor wants to, or any other committee member wants to have their views on this, and anyone else interesting to go into the Grenfell recovery and COVID-19 recovery for working group, because at least we need to have 2 to 3 councillors, as well as members of the public and heads of organizations if they're willing to get involved. And I will be inviting on your behalf committee members who will be involved in and supporting this issue. Yes, Councillor Dori Schmatterling, please.
Let me just sort this out. Right, I think I can see myself. Let me just I'll get rid of my hand first. What I wanted to say was, obviously all these topics are of importance, but I would like to echo Councillor Hammond's comments about we have to decide how much of this is suitable for only a working group or also for the whole committee. I'm quite interested in this, as we discussed, in the communities thing, in the communities and the Grenfell recovery. I would like to say also that, because you mentioned in your introduction, and you spoke about social, and in this context, and the context of the report I'll be presenting at the towards the end of this evening, that I'm hoping that there is a way forward somehow for that too, given how much work's been put in. But I'm happy to consider joining the communities group, but allow me to think about that. But I stress, I think all the topics chosen are really important, so it's very difficult.
Thank you very much for that contribution, Councillor Schmatterling, and we will, yes, as you said, we will allow you to consider, but I will put your name down for the time being, and I hope that you will be working well with Councillor Robert Freeman. Anyone else who wants to get involved, the communities and Grenfell recovery, it would be good to have other councillors supporting, so that we know we have at least 3 councillors working on one project, and that is a long-term project. That's a working group chaired by Robert Freeman, Councillor Freeman. Anyone else? Shall I don't want to name names, but if you all be quiet about it, then perhaps I will ask you individually, or if not, we can think about it tonight, this evening, and hopefully within next 24 hours, I'll put your name down for the working group that you wanted to do. Again, Greg Hammond, please. Councillor Hammond.
Yes, thanks, Chair. I was just going to make a point that don't necessarily have to nail down every single person to something, if because some of these issues might be that the working group considers might be one-offs that lots of us can dip into under Robert's chairmanship, under Councillor Freeman's chairmanship, and we don't need to limit ourselves. So I'm very welcome that Councillor Freeman's volunteered to chair, and that Councillor Schmatterling's interested, and that's quite a good framework to be starting with.
Absolutely. No, thank you. I wasn't actually going to call someone, but I just was giving them the warning that we may actually go down that route. But yes, it's not an issue for me to put the councillors name by name to say their committee groups that they want to get involved. I'm sure they will all have been interested in different working groups, and I have their details and their support, the emails that they have written to me, and I know all the committee members are willing to get involved in this issue, and I thank them in advance. For the time being, I would move on to the other working groups for this. Let me just get back to this one. Okay, any other working group that we are looking into the housing safety? The topic number 2 is the housing safety and the healthy homes. Again, I would like to emphasize that this housing safety and healthy homes will be conducted as a joint with environmental. With the Environment Select Committee. And I'm pleased to say that we have the chair of the Environment Select Committee this evening with us, who will have a contribution to this discussion, even when that is right. And thank you, Councillor Will Pascal, for taking the time to join this committee. And I would like to do the same to your committee when the time comes. And we would like to work with you on this. but we will first decide who councillors that will be working on this. And once we have councillors working on this healthy homes, housing safety and healthy homes, and looking into specifically antisocial behavior, CCTV cameras for safety of housing, repairs, and the working group will be a productive working group. We'll also have members from the public who will be happy to contribute to this. So if I start, people putting their names forward. Okay, whoever spoke to Councillor Hamish Adorian, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make a general comment, if I may, on the 3 remaining topics on housing safety, repairs and housing management. I think it's important we set out from the start what the scope will be of these 3 topics. Are they specifically around the housing that's owned and managed by the council, or is it also including private housing as well as housing run by housing associations? Because of course we do have quite a mix in the borough, and I'm just concerned that these topics, it should be clear what it is we're focusing on, and it shouldn't actually just look at the housing that's managed directly by the council.
Thank you, Councillor Dorian. If I may just clarify that point. Yes, the following up meeting after this meeting, councillors who put their names forward to any select committee will be meeting with officers, as Jackie said earlier, and with that we will be able to precisely to what precise scope of each topic is, and then we'll be able to know. But for your information, we have been in a discussion with overview scrutiny committee, and what we came up with when it comes to health homes, for example, environmental and healthy check for annual environmental and health check will be for the properties owned by the council, followed by properties owned by the housing associations, as well as privately rented properties in RBKC. So we will have a plan to work with all different properties that are in RBKC, and that will be the plan. But however, the way on how to start, whether we should start with properties owned by the council first, and then inform other organizations or outside entities, then we will be able to do that. But only the working group and its chair will be able to make that final details. Tonight, what we are talking about, our discussion is mainly on how and how many people want to get involved, who will be leading the topic, each topic, and what else can be doing to involve each other topic. So, and how to scrutinize. Some of the areas that we've talked about will be one-off scrutiny meeting. For example, I'm working with officers to set up only one item, maybe 1 to 2 item agenda for the next meeting in December the 7th, around December, if I precisely remember the date. And that will be just about the housing repairs. So we will dedicate all the time for the scrutiny to look into the housing repairs. The budget that has been put aside for the housing repairs, nearly £200 million, and what has been done, what is going to be done, and for how long. And we want to see results by the end of this scrutiny year, which will be ending May 2021. So we will take on that. Maybe we'll take another point for the homelessness. Temporary accommodation is in and out of borough. We will do that. We have a homelessness strategy this evening. So we will have some of the topics here and there, but we want also have topics or an agenda item specifically to go for a few months to look into it and run surveys with the local people, our residents, how they feel about it. So I hope that I answered that question, and you can make up your mind which committee. And again, as I said, we don't have to specifically give us tonight, although we had a good start with 2 councillors putting their names forward. I also would like a person to put their names forward, and I had discussions with this Councillor Greg Hammond, who also interesting to be the chair of the working group for the housing. And we will have different sectors in housing. We will be looking into the, as I said, healthy homes. We'll be looking into the housing safety. And I remember Councillor Mo Bakhtiar also was interesting to go into the housing, specifically healthy homes. So yes, if I answered your question, you can come back, follow-up question, Councillor Dorian.
No, thank you, Chair. That's clear.
Thank you. Okay, Greg, Will Pascal, I can see your hands up, Councillor Will Pascal. I will come to you as soon as we finish with the committee. You will be the first person to be called.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As you indicated, I'd be happy to lead for our committee on this, recognising that we'll be working jointly on some aspects of it within the environment. In terms of building safety, I think I'd be very interested in doing some visits out. I know that's easy to say at the moment, and we've got no idea what's going to happen in the next few months. But it should certainly be an aspiration to be for us to be going out rather than sitting in the ivory tower. But obviously we will have to go with the flow in terms of the COVID restrictions as the pandemic develops or not. So yes, very happy to lead that side of it. And as and when the topics appear, of course, we can have people dipping in and out as well. But I very much welcome the ideas that Councillor Bakhtiar put forward earlier, which feed into this, and hopefully Mo will be around to join. And I don't know if he's got his hand up, so I'll defer now and let some others have their say.
Thank you very much. Yes, Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar, you've mentioned that you want to specifically take the lead on housing safety issue. Please come forward.
Thank you, Chairman. I have mentioned the CCTV, antisocial behavior and drug use and crime in the borough in the past few years. I had a walk 2 years ago with the leader in my ward of St. Helens, and I have given her insight what's happening in the specific areas in the ward. So it's a great issue really in North Kensington. I think it's everywhere, but specifically where the housing estates. In last week's workshop, CCTVs were mentioned, but that was on main roads, on nothing mentioned about the housing estates. And I raise a question again. I am glad that we could manage and deal with this and under this committee, because we need to tighten and spend more on installing more CCTVs in our housing estates, because all these problems are interlinked. Antisocial behavior, drug dealing, crime. I think we could manage this and minimize the damage by having and installing more CCTVs. Yes, I am really interested in this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar. I remember we also had a chat with Councillor Tom Bennett, and also Councillor Hamish Odorian about housing RBKC homes that are not owned by RBKC but owned by housing associations, and specifically when it comes to repairs, when it comes to environmental checks, and the connection or the working relationship between the council and also housing associations. And I just don't know if the councillors want to chip in, but Tom Bennett, please come forward. Yeah, you can speak now, Tom.
Oh yes, yeah, not a huge amount to add, Chair. Just to say that yeah, it is a subject that I'm very interested in, a very important subject, and I'd be very happy to support on this working group wherever I can.
Thank you very much. And I'm assuming Councillor Dorian will speak when he feels that it's right to say about this topic. And I know we've talked about this, but since we have now 2 people committed to the committee and Tom now supporting, we can move forward and hopefully have 2 working committees, one for Grenfell and COVID-19 recoveries, and the other will be housing safety and healthy homes, and chaired by Councillor Greg Hammond, and also lead member for Councillor Mo Bakhtiar for when it comes to housing safety, especially on CCTV camera, drug dealing, and any other issue. There's another point which I would like to raise. I've said it earlier before, the housing management, including housing repairs. Housing repairs could well be one item agenda, and that I don't want to repeat what I've said earlier, but we will be sending invitations to all RA chairs of RAs, resident association chairs in the borough, and we will invite them to the next meeting. And if we can hear from most of them, they will have the platform, what has been done about the repairs, what's working, what's not working, what can we do forward, and hopefully that will be one item agenda, and the way forward will be housing the chairs of the housing associations, specifically contributing to the policy setting, as well as what they want to see the next 6 to 8 months before the lifetime for this working group or the scrutiny ends next May. That is a summary for this working group. Now I would like to invite Councillor Will Pascal, who thankfully joined us this evening. Councillor Will Pascal, the platform is yours.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say that we are here 2 weeks in advance, 2 weeks behind, sorry, but where you are yourself now. So we have not decided our topics in a formal sense as you are doing this evening, but I can put forward a draft suggestion of how we might work together. And the area that we are looking at, that we think, I've spoken with you personally before, that we feel that we can work jointly with you, is that we are focusing as one of our particular areas on the council's commitment to achieve carbon neutrality by 2030. And one of the things we're going to focus on is the council owned stock, which is 10,000 homes roughly, both rented and leased. And we think that's there is also a further commitment that the council has is to do this on a wider basis for including housing association and private sector homes by 2040 in the housing sector, that is, but it goes wider than that. So what we feel is that we would like to join in with your committee in a way that hasn't been decided yet, but to tackle the area of how the housing is going to be upgraded over the next 10 years. Because if we've got 10,000 houses to be upgraded from a carbon point of view and a fuel poverty point of view, and from a cold homes point of view, and from all the problems to do with condensation, etc., and the changes required to heating systems, and to achieve that in a way which is commensurate with communities' wishes and the other objectives to do with safety and maintenance that you've outlined, that we feel there needs to be coordination between the council's effort on the 2030 commitment and the commitments that you're examining under your scrutiny. So I would confirm here that we would like to do this, but the precise way that we will do it, I think we've agreed between us that we will ask you to come to our select committee in 2 weeks' time, and then we will have a meeting with officers to work out a modus operandi. I mean, I think the obvious way would be we'd work with your chairman of your group and maybe one or two of your sort of deputies who are focusing on particular subject areas, but we won't necessarily participate in all the meetings to do with the wide range of brief that you have on this subject, because our brief on our subject goes wider in a different dimension. But where we cross over, where there's a common interest, which I believe there's a very strong one, that we'd be very happy to work together. I come back to the fact that I think that the commitment the council's made to get neutral carbon by 2030 is a very big mountain to climb. It's an extremely worthwhile one, because by doing that, it will achieve many of the things that are needed for decent homes and healthy homes. But it'll also develop some exemplars of practice that can be applied in other sectors. It's been interesting that I've already done a visit in the ether, if you like, on Zoom or Teams to the Lancaster West project that is going on at the moment. And technically that's very interesting from an energy and carbon neutral point of view, but it's also obviously got a very wide-ranging consultation with the local community on the sort of areas that you've been talking about. And then about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, I went to a housing association down in the south of the borough, and they are doing many of the same things in a slightly different way, but with many of the same social aims and financial constrictions and technical difficulties that the Lanc West estate is doing. So we will be looking to pick up on good practice in all sectors, but I come back to the fact that our main focus will be carbon neutral by 2030.
Thank you, Councillor Will, and thank you again for making the time this evening. And as you've said, I'm looking forward to joining your committee when you have the meeting. And beforehand, as you've just mentioned, we will have a meeting with officers and to precisely pinpoint areas that we'll be working together. Yes, I understand the council's long-term commitment is your main focus, but also for us, safety and the environment, it goes hand in hand. Just to name view, cladding will be an issue that we will be looking into deeply and specifically, which is what has caused Grenfell and we've lost members of our communities. So thank you once again for the time being, for joining this evening. If I may call Councillor Tom Panett, do you want to come back again, Tom, or your right hand was raised before?
Yeah, sorry, I just forgot to unraise my hand.
Problem at all. Thank you. Now I would like to invite Councillor Judith Blakeman. Judith.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It was just that you mentioned something about doing a single report on repairs, and I was wondering whether you're going to include repairs for residents who are put into temporary housing, because that forms quite a large part of my casework. I don't know about other colleagues.
Thank you, Judith. You've just added that to the item. And yes, when we said repairs, we have said repairs and repairs that any, whether it's a temporary accommodation in the borough or even out of the borough, because we're still responsible for those we have taken out of the borough, will be included. So, and I'm sure the minutes will be mentioning that the temporary repairs will be part of the item. And thank you for that item. It will be included to the agenda, and it will be part of the repairs.
That's great, thanks.
I'm quite happy to move on from now onwards and conclude the summary for that discussion we just had. A4. Yes, we have agreed to set up 2 working committees. First, the one led by Councillor Robert Freeman will be the Grenfell recovery and COVID-19 recovery, and Councillor Dorish Matling will be hopefully supporting when it comes to the time, and he's still thinking about it, but we've just put him down for the time being. The second working group that we'll be having for this Housing and Community Selective Committee will be Housing, Safety and Healthy Homes. Will be this committee will be chaired by Councillor Greg Hammond, as well as also Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar, who will be the lead person for the housing safety and when it comes to drug dealing and antisocial behavior. And those are the 2 working group committees. We have also agreed this evening that we will have a one item agenda sometimes, and to provide scrutiny where we cannot do under the working group. So we will continue for different type of working group where there's a one report, one item, and the first meeting followed by this meeting will be in December, and that will be specifically for the housing management team and looking into the repairs. And I will be inviting on behalf of the committee all RBKC resident association chairs, and hopefully that will be an interesting meeting. As last point made by Councillor Judith Blakeman, just mentioned that the repairs will also be included, temporary housing repairs, not just the council-owned properties, but also temporary housing repairs in and out of the borough. I think that summarizes that point. If I may now move to A5, an update on a working group and a wider Grenfell housing, wider Grenfell household and temporary accommodations. And I would like to welcome the lead member for this agenda item, Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith, and any other officers who he wants to call for this meeting. Kim, the platform is yours, and welcome. And I'm sure Dan will be with you, but for the time being, we'll be happy to hear the summary. We have read, I'm sure that the members have read, and anyone else who's attending this meeting must have read the paper that you have provided, and we look forward to discussion with that. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And yes, I do hope Dan is with me. I'll just start with a really short introduction to this, because this report is really setting out some amendments on how we'll work with the wider Grenfell households who are still in temporary accommodation. And this effectively is we're implementing a policy that's already been agreed in 2018. And we've been out and we've informed fully those residents who of our intentions to start applying this this policy. So I think just to recap, we have 89 wider Grenfell households who chose to move into temporary accommodation, and 50 are now in new permanent homes, and 24 have come back to the estate. So we currently have 15 people who are currently remaining in temporary accommodation, and most of that is in the private rental sector. The main challenge we have here is sourcing suitable properties, because 10 of these 15 people need 3 and 4 bedrooms, and obviously we are finding that quite difficult. We found some from registered providers of social housing, but a number of residents have expressed saying that they don't want to move into RPT properties and they want to wait until council-owned properties, and that could mean quite a wait. So the current private rental that we have is extremely expensive. It's costing us £350,000 per annum. And therefore, I mean, particularly with the pressures that we're having at the moment, this isn't sustainable. And it also, another key part of this paper is that 7 of the residents are currently sitting on 2 tenancies, and they've indicated they don't want to return to the estate. But those houses are obviously very much desperately needed in terms of providing new homes, and they're costing us, as far as the HRA, which again is under tremendous pressure, about £75,000 a year. So really what we need to do is apply our policy in full, and we're doing it really for a number of 3 principal reasons. One, very much in terms of fairness to the other temporary accommodation householders, where we're not implementing the 2 offers rule. And the cost obviously is impacting on the Grenfell budget. As year-on-year funding starts to reduce, and it limits the impact of this high-cost hotel is going to give us on that. And obviously, third part, which you mustn't forget, is it's important for us to find secure homes as a crucial step of helping residents get on with the rest of their lives. So, we're going to make these amendments now in order to support the households to move into suitable homes, and also ensuring fair and equitable treatment across the council, and ensuring the homes at Lankwest can be relet to other residents. Anyway, I'm very happy to, I don't know if Dan wanted to expand on that or take questions.
Dan, are you here to expand on that, or shall we straight to the question?
I'm here, but to be honest, I think Councillor Taylor-Smith has covered the main points, and I know we've got a long agenda tonight, so I suggest rather than me expand on that any further, we just take any questions that members of the committee may have.
Thank you. If I may start quickly, in terms of what you have mentioned, Kim, 3 years on the disaster, and we haven't managed to, as a council, to rehouse properties that are next to Grenfell. I understand we have COVID-19, and we are in a very tough situation. We're in crisis as we speak. We cannot work from our offices. We have to work from our homes. And yes, if I just say, my question was about 2 points. One, the what can be seen, or what is actually seen, the failure of to rehouse Grenfell affected community. That's the 1 point. The second point is, how can we get, in the report you've mentioned that you want to rehouse, residents who have been affected by the disaster, having in mind COVID-19. Will that be a stretch to do it? Because I think that our residents have already been suffering because of what's been happening. And if they added to this pressure, now that you come up with this policy, isn't a bit unwise to do at this moment of time? We could have waited maybe a couple of months now. I understand you have the strength of the budget and you can say that, but I think it's unwise for our communities to go through while we are going through a pandemic, to be told you will be taken out of your housing, and there will be 2 systems. And my final question on this will be the 4.7. It says letters sent to the household registered under the WGRB that remains the walkways address, to advise that section 5.4 and 5.5 of the WGRP is now come into effect, or will now come into effect. Looking into and reading the report, I haven't seen 5.4 and 5.5. I may have missed it, but I understand this letter, the last item for this is 4.10. So what does that mean? Taking into this, the advice will come into, or this will come into place, come into effect 5.4, and 5.5, which I have not seen in the report. Again, I will thank you if you can answer, and I will invite the committee, followed by anyone else from the councillors in the backbench, as well as councillors and the members of the public who are interested to ask questions on this topic. Anyone can answer, both teams, but I would appreciate if Kim can.
Well, let me do. I think let's do this in two parts, and I'll let Dan answer the second part. I think, why are we doing this now? I think, well, Chairman, I mean, let's not forget that there within the walkways, I think there were 380 households. So a few number of those went into temporary accommodation in the immediate aftermath of the fire. And I think we can demonstrate that the vast majority of those people that did go in, I think it was originally 129, that we have rehoused them. But really what we're looking about now is 15 households. And the issue with 15 households is principally bedroom size, because we don't have a large selection of 3 and 4 bedroom properties. We're going to incorporate that within our build program. We've also been buying through it with our capital fund ex-council homes. There's 3 going through at the moment of this bedroom size that we can give people a choice. But effectively, what we can't do is we can't offer the same housing policy that we had with the survivors in terms of allowing people to make multiple choices. What we have to do is we have to identify suitable homes, and we have to make offers to encourage them to move. Because this it isn't fair in terms of the people holding these 2 homes that are not giving, not moving. I think as far as other people, we have to treat them the same way we're dealing with other TA, but we will continue to do it very sensitively. I mean, 3 years have elapsed. We've spent a lot of time working with all of the individuals. We've made multiple offers to the individuals as well in order to try and support them to find a new home. But we do need to address this. As far as the technical questions, I'm going to look at Dan on that one.
So I think picking up questions 2 and 3. So on the question of what it means to be doing this during the pandemic, again, you're absolutely right that there are issues to balance here. The fact is that we are safely moving families into void properties at the moment. We've had to change some of the ways that we do things in terms of how viewings work and so on, how cleaning works. But the basics are that we are not suspending allocations and moving families into properties now, because we know that we can do it safely, and all of those measures that we take to do it safely with any family moving into any property, we would apply in the same way. I think the challenge that we face is that if we were to delay moves full stop, or specifically moves for this cohort, it might be for a couple of months, but it might be for a lot longer based on what we currently know about the pandemic, which is not very much. And I think on balance, our priority, because we're comfortable that we can do it safely, is to move ahead. And then on the question about the specific reference to paragraphs 5.4 and 5.5, so forgive me, those are references not to the report which you've got in front of you, but to the wider Grenfell rehousing policy itself. And I'm just posting a link to that in the chat for those who've got access to it. But for those who don't, just to be clear, that what those paragraphs say is that they set out. Paragraph 5.4 describes the entitlement to 2 reasonable offers, and then paragraph 5.5 describes what happens if those 2 offers aren't taken up. But so just to clarify, it's not a reference to this report; it's a reference to the policy itself, which is a separate document.
Which should have been added if that's the case, but I guess it's a technical issue. Yes, others can get involved and hopefully read about it, because I couldn't find it on this report. That's why I've raised the question. Yes, Councillor Dory Schmatling, yes, please ask your questions.
If I can operate this quickly.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
And you can see me. Good.
I can hear you. Yes.
This question of, thank you. The question that was being discussed about the issues of rehousing people in the Lancaster West Estate and others around there, I think 16 or 15 families, prompts actually the broader question is, I think this is possibly the right place to put it, in terms of the new house building program, how will the room sizes and home sizes compare with what there is currently in the walkways and in Lancaster West and so on, and in Grenfell Tower?
Well, again, the 600 home programme isn't specifically for Lancaster West rehousing. And I would very hope that the 15 people we would have moved into housing before the first phase 1 is completed, although we're starting the spades in the ground earlier in the new year. I mean, what we obviously have to do is that it's not, although the biggest demand we have is for 1 and 2 bedroom homes, we are very conscious that also our most difficult people to rehouse are people that have DDA requirements, specialist requirements, and also people with larger room size. And that's something which we obviously have to look at when it comes to designing the mix of the homes that we've got, to do that. But can I just say that's something we're looking at the moment, but it's not specifically for Lancaster West.
No, can I just follow up? No, I understand that. I mean, I didn't expect that. It takes far too long. I was just wondering in general, because, I mean, part of the issue, as I understood it, rehousing Grenfell Tower people. Now, I'm not talking about rehousing, but it's just the size of room and the accommodation was highly desirable. I'm just wondering if this kind of thing is being done for the new social homes or affordable homes or whatever you want to call them. Of the 600, will they be of similar standard size-wise?
Well, the short answer to that, Dory, is no. I mean, the Grenfell homes were built under a Parker Morris standard, and they were much bigger. Over the years, the decent home standards have become a bit smaller. And also, the styles have changed as well. A lot of the new homes will have open plan arrangements where, again, within the older accommodation, you had separate bedrooms. So no, they won't be the same size, but they will still be good quality homes, and most importantly, also ones with a good carbon footprint as well.
Thank you.
Dory, just to I think what you were asking clarify specifically is the number of properties that are high in demand for the borough. And Kim, this is to you question. I think I've if I remember correctly, I've read about homelessness policy, and one of the recommendations or one of the paragraphs mentioned that there was only 6 properties that has been giving out all the 2018-2019 year, and for 3-bedroom apartments. So I think what Dory is asking, if I may correctly, is the need for 3-bedroom in the borough. I think as well also 1 or 2 bedrooms is highly. So if you can incorporate that need into the development of the new 600 homes policies, that will cover the need for the borough. I think that's the point that he was making, I'm sure.
If I could jump in here, I think that the principle, which is that the way that we scope out the new homes programme should match as much as possible our understanding of the need on the waiting list and so on, is absolutely accepted. And of course, part of the trick here is trying to anticipate what that need will be, not just now, but to try and make as much of a prediction as we can about the long term, because of course these are homes that we hope will be standing for 50 or more years. But the principle absolutely is the right one. Of course, the very particular emergency circumstance that the council faced in the wake of the tragedy, where we were rehousing people out of one building in an emergency like that, is one that of course we never hope to be facing again, and one doesn't plan for that kind of situation. Instead, what we plan for is what we know as the kind of general picture of demand that builds up on our housing register in a normal period, and that's the information that we use, that we will use to plan the new homes programme, subject of course to the constraints of the sites and so on. But we have a fair degree of flexibility to change the bedroom sizes to meet demand.
Thank you. And I would like to call Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar to the platform to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. A simple question: how many officers do we have still working on Grenfell Place?
Dan, do you want to cover that? I'm just trying to, we've got dedicated officers on.
Yeah, so it's I
just can't remember the number.
Yeah, so I'm afraid I don't know off the top of my head the number of officers working on.
I think it's 3 specific people, obviously, that would incorporate, but obviously we've got a very small number now of people who've yet to move into a permanent home. But I think it's 3.
Yeah,
but I'd have to clarify that, Councillor, back to you. I can come back
Okay.
and clarify the number.
Okay, thank you.
But we do
That's
have
good enough.
dedicated people specifically for those cases.
Okay. Does that include, does the government still have offices dedicated to Grenfell, or has that program finished?
No, that's they're no longer involved with the council.
Okay, it's all us. Thank you.
Now I would like to call Councillor Hamish Adorian to ask a question.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the 7 households who've indicated that they don't want to return to the Lanquest estate, but still have their original tenancies on the estate. I just want to understand a bit more about, if they don't want to return, why are the tenancies not yet relinquished?
I think let's just start. I mean, obviously, a lot of the tenants have experienced being in temporary homes in RBKC, so there's an understandable fear that that they might be left in temporary homes for some time, because at the moment they're in private rental, which is effectively a temporary home. I think so. The perception is that holding on to a tenancy gives them some form of protection. Now, we have written and we've given every assurance we can through to the solicitors and from the council to actually give a guarantee that obviously they will eventually have a home. But what we can't do, particularly on the large rents, is say when. So, I mean, as I say, the majority of people have released. Obviously, that some people have released, but some people are very fearful, and we're trying to break that fear barrier down to get them to release. But that's really the answer to your question.
Okay, thank you. Just one second question is just on the shortfall between the temporary accommodation charges and the cost of private sector accommodation, which I understand is about £360,000 per year. And it looks like that's been coming from the Grenfell recovery budget. Obviously, there's lots of competing demands on that budget from different sources, but I was wondering, has this really been a significant use then of the Grenfell recovery budget to pay for essentially private accommodation costs?
Yes, is the short answer. And I think you only have to look at the numbers and the cost to realise that these are actually quite expensive private rental that we needed to acquire quickly. And that is also another consideration, that we could talk to people about moving them to more suitable private rental accommodation while we're trying to find them a new home.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe that concludes the select committee questions, unless any other member of the select committee wants to ask a question. I will now invite members and also any councillors who want to ask a question on this topic, as well as residents who are now attending and have the opportunity to ask questions. I cannot see your hand. Let me see.
Yeah, mine.
Yes, please, Samia. Yes, welcome.
Thank you and good evening. I'm going to start in a very unusual. I'm going to invite the committee to recognize and thank the work of an officer who has not left RBKC. Many of you will be aware of the work that Altin Smajli did in terms of providing. He did make a difference. He cared and it showed. He was reliable, approachable, and he knew his stuff. And he made my life easier. Saved a lot of time. It's a great loss because the paper tonight, I wasn't aware of that. It's only 2 residents of Brownie House who are currently waiting to be rehoused that pointed to me they had received it and they didn't understand what the letter was about. And actually, we don't have a replacement. We don't have a person to go to, because the idea of having a nominated officer is, accepting that sometimes things go wrong, and we don't have anybody within housing needs that we can go to when there are situations that need to be resolved. I'm saying this not because I'm saying this out of experience. I worked with different local authority housing needs departments on an advisory expertise, working with casework, and we've always had nominated officers to resolve situations. It worked quite well. There's some local authorities who had my number in the staff room. or the other day I had some.
Samia, your connection is breaking up, I'm afraid to say. Maybe you can speak, switch off the camera. And
I'm going to ask my question. Can you hear me now?
Sorry, we couldn't hear you properly. If you don't mind, if you can switch off the camera and speak to us by just the audio, and maybe we could hear you. But I saw you were breaking up. We couldn't hear your question specifically.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Can you hear me better? Yeah.
I think so.
Well, I just wanted to start by pointing out that he needs to be recognized, and it's a great loss for us because there's no one that engages with us. And when I talk about somebody to replace him, somebody we can escalate to, is not only house, because as you're aware, we do house that space, and we told those housing needs cases, from different parts of the borough. And in terms of this Grenfell rehousing policy, as supported one of our residents, and the application process is not straightforward. And about people who have already applied, but this policy is not limited. So what the policy says is anybody from Bromley House can apply and get the 900 points. It's not too clear to people at what point they will no longer be eligible to apply for it. And I think it'd be good to look at reviewing that policy. And that's the same with the local lettings policy. The application process doesn't work. So really my point tonight is I understand that some changes need to be made. I understand the challenges that we are facing. But I think sometimes you can get the right outcome in moving people into permanent accommodation if you work or if you have dedicated individuals within the council who can pick up certain issues. We've got two tenants in Bromley House who are currently waiting to be rehoused permanently. And these are difficult and challenging cases because they require E++ properties. And I'm not too sure who works with them and what is it, because we all know that ground floor properties are not available.
Thank you.
So I'd like to hear if we could have a dedicated person and how they can be supported. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's a few questions to Kim and
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Sorry, I do apologise because you were cutting out, but I got the gist of what you're saying. Is that I'm going to defer to Dan because I don't believe I can't see an issue that we couldn't nominate for the small number of people somebody that they can go and talk to if they haven't got that nomination. I'm slightly surprised that you say that they don't have somebody to refer to, because I know the individuals who've picked up obviously Altin's work. I think the other thing I'd just like to say is that Altin was absolutely fantastic, and he did a great job for us, and we wish him well, and personally I miss him a lot. But Dan, can you pick up on this issue about nominating somebody to look after these specific cases?
Yeah, so we do have officers working in housing needs who are working specifically on the Grenfell rehousing. So it might be something that it's worth you and I picking this up offline so we can make sure that connection is properly made. I mean, I think I was unfortunate enough never to have the chance to meet Altin because he left soon after I arrived, and because of COVID we were never in the office at the same time. But I recognise, as it were, that to a lot of people, including many of his ex-colleagues, he's not replaceable. We do have new arrangements in place, which you and I should probably pick up on outside of this meeting, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. Just let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. And is there any other councillor or member of the public who wants to ask a question? If not, I will summarize this topic and then we will move on from here. Samia, your hand is still up. I'm assuming that was the previous question. Thank you. If not, I will summarize. But before I summarize the meeting for this topic, I would suggest to the leadership and the senior officers to work hard with these 15 households to make sure that after 3 years of waiting, we don't leave them high and dry. And because of the COVID-19, the situation that we are in, we would not want to this 3 years of waiting to end up with to be threatened, or to be threatened by the council and the policy change. On another hand, I understand we have a lot of people waiting on the registry, housing registry, and will be happy to move into the properties that are now empty. On that regards, I think the committee will recommend to work with households that are in a tough position have been in a waiting list for all this time. If I were just to summarize the points, I think the leadership understands that it's a difficult period for this time for people to be moved because of COVID-19, and also the committee recommends that the New Homes program will cover the needs for our residents, and that we're talking about the bedrooms, the number of bedrooms required, since we have a very short supply of bedrooms. And also, lead member Kim Taylor-Smith will get back to Councillor Mo Bakhtiar and for the question that he asked, which regarding the numbers. And Samia asked the committee and the whole council to recognize officers who used to work for us and for their time. And I would like to, on behalf of the committee, the Housing and Select Committee, to thank the officer and make sure that his full name will be on the minutes, and we will recognize him and we wish him all the best what he does in the future. And finally, to review the policy of about points, and Dan and Samia will have offline meeting about this and hopefully come to understand where the support needed to be provided. I think that sums up with this important Grenfell this meeting that we have just about rehousing, an update of working and the wider Grenfell household in temporary accommodations, and I'll be more than happy to move on to the next item on this. Again, thank you officers and Dan and the rest of the officers who've worked on this, and Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith for your ever available to when it comes to scrutiny. I do thank you for that, and I have said that before. Yes, we may not agree on points, but I thank you for your attendance, all the meetings that's required by this committee and previous committees. Now I'm moving into the an update for on housing fire risk management strategy, and I welcome again the lead member or anyone else who will, any other senior management. Kim, if you want to continue, it's fine.
Yes, no, I'll give a quick introduction, and I know that I've got other officers here that can assist. So I think really just start, Mr. Chairman, and it's obviously very much highlighted with your opening of this meeting that, you know, Grenfell really shone a light on fire safety within this borough. And how important having efficient, you know, fire safety policies are and processes are. And again, my thoughts are always with the 72 people that lost their lives. We brought this to the last scrutiny committee, but unfortunately, it sort of got bumped off and didn't make an item. So we've since taken it to the Tenants Consultancy Committee this week, and so residents have been updated very much on what's been done and been able to contribute to that. So leading the way on health and safety is obviously one of our key priorities in our housing strategy and the heart of everything we're doing now as far as the council. And this report outlines that we've made significant progress in each of the 17 actions that we set out in the fire safety policy that we approved in December of 2019. And we also committed to implement the phase 1 inquiry recommendations, even whilst we're waiting for the results of the fire safety consultation that the government is now doing to be included in the building regulations bill. And in doing that, we very much worked with experts, residents, partners, and put us very much at the forefront as far as the debate is concerned. And learning lessons, encouraging greater standards across, you know, the board is obviously incredibly important, not just for those in council housing, but really for every resident. And I think I'd start with a great source of pride to say that the RBKC fire safety team have enabled us to be the first local authority in the country to have a BAFE SP205, I think is the section, accreditation, which is really, again, fulfilled the ambition that we set ourselves when we approved the fire safety policy in 2019, and credit goes to the team for doing that. Within the fire safety team, I think, as you're aware, we've got a very large comprehensive fire door replacement program. I think we've replaced about 1,100 so far, and we've got a lot more in the pipeline, which are currently going to be surveyed and designed, and all of this we've done during the COVID pandemic. We haven't badgered residents when they felt uncomfortable or they were self-isolating, and we've got some very good feedback from residents, I think, who have appreciated us, that the way they've worked, and particularly things that have been very much long overdue. So I think really just to conclude, our fire team and officers have been working diligently to ensure that we continue to progress this program, but there's still a lot more to do. So many thanks to them, and I'm very happy to take questions, or again, well, let's just take questions and we'll go from there.
All right. Okay. Thank you. And if there is anyone else to ask questions, we will directly go to questioning. This time, I would like to start with Councillor Robert Freeman. Councillor, it's yours now. You may ask a question.
Thank you very much, Chairman. First of all, congratulations to everybody on implementing this programme. I think it's extremely encouraging. But I wonder if I could just ask for slight clarification. Basically, how high are these buildings? Because it seems that what we're doing is to install dry risers, but clearly if the buildings are over a certain height, I think it's usually 50 metres, the recommendation is to install wet risers. And if the building's over 30 metres, under Part B, though that doesn't strictly apply to buildings put up before 2007, the safe way of going forward would be to retrofit sprinklers. And if I can ask all my questions at the same time, I know we're only dealing with fire safety, but the other thing which has always worried me is water safety, and particularly the possibility of Legionnaire's disease. And I just make a plea that we don't forget to keep a very firm watch on the water safety in tall buildings. Those are my questions.
Okay, well, thank you. What I will do is I'll rather than attempt to answer them myself, I'd ask either Doug, who's on, or I know that Keith Todd is on as well, as if somebody would like to answer on my behalf.
So certainly, Councillor Freeman, I will bring in Keith to discuss the technicalities of the legislation regarding fire safety. You're quite right. Fire safety makes up just one part of the overall compliance approach to safety on our buildings, and water is certainly one that we take very seriously, and we have a dedicated officer whose sole job it is to ensure that water is of the right quality, properly tested, the tanks are properly cleaned, and so on and so forth. And we'd be happy to share that information if you so wish. But there is a programme for that, so I just wanted to reassure you of that. And I will ask.
Just to interrupt you 1 second. I think it'd be very useful not to share it with me so much, but to share it with the committee, if you'd be happy to do that.
Okay, absolutely no problem. And I will ask Keith to comment on the fire safety.
Sure. So to respond firstly, Councillor Freeman, to your point on dry risers, our approach is to retrofit dry risers to buildings over 18 metres that currently don't have them. But you're exactly right. The recommendation within approved document B for new buildings over 50 metres is that they would be fitted with a wet riser. And we are in the process of designing retrofitting wet risers to buildings over 50 metres. So that will be in the towers at World's End Estate and in the towers at the Silchester Estate. So you're exactly right to raise that, but we will be pursuing that, and we will be installing those wet risers in those taller buildings. In terms of sprinkler systems, the requirement for sprinklers in new builds over 30 metres was in place under Part B of the building regulations prior to about May or June of this year, when the requirement for new builds actually reduced to 11 metres. So that's the finished floor level of 11 metres. I take your point and you're exactly right, that applies to new builds and isn't for retrofitting. We have looked at retrofitting sprinklers, and our approach to that at present is to do that on a risk-based approach. So we're focusing on installing suppression systems, i.e. sprinkler systems, initially in sheltered and hostel accommodation where we've got more vulnerable residents. But we're also looking at other buildings such as Trellick Tower and the walkways at Lancaster West for retrofitting of sprinklers. So that's kind of our approach at the moment. And I think Doug's handled your point on water safety, but I'm happy to take any further questions.
Thank you very much.
You're on mute, Kasim.
Yeah, thank you, Greg. Yes, I would now like to call Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar to ask a question.
Thank you, Chairman. Something related to fire, and since we are on the topic, we have a large number of housing estates in the borough, and some residents don't obey the rules and they put hazardous materials and flammable plastic chairs or tables in the common in the common areas. I have seen residents complain, and I have seen warning notice, asking them to remove them, but I don't think they will take the advice. The question is, how can we enforce this? Is there a second or third stage of this if residents don't comply with this?
Doug, would you like to take that one?
Yep. We have the policy we've got at the moment is what's known as a managed approach. So we will allow residents to have a pot plant that's got a pot that isn't flammable, or a doormat of a certain size, but that's about it. Anything else we will not allow to have in the communal areas, and we have been disposing of those belongings, I'm afraid, where we've warned people quite regularly. And lately we have had to take potential more legal action, if you like, against people who are repeat offenders. It's regrettable. We would like people to just understand that the communal areas and fire safety is everybody's business, and they need to be upholding that. But if people are going to continue to put things in the communal areas, and we've had to take action. We do try and work with them, though, to try and provide alternative storage space and so on and so forth, so that we can get this to a point where we don't have to do that, but we can't allow it to continue. One of the bigger issues for us has been with mobility scooters and so on and so forth. So we've got a scheme now where we will provide a mobility scooter which will fit into the property, so as to and then the bigger mobility scooter we're finding other places to put, and that mainly affects our sheltered property. But it's similar, but we can't allow flammable materials in the communal area.
Could I just add very quickly a point on that? We've also been trying to communicate directly with residents to reiterate the importance of keeping the common areas clear. So we've actually come up with some direct communications. We've written to residents, particularly about things like balcony safety, and we've produced emergency plan leaflets, which we've prepared in conjunction with residents, and we're distributing them across the borough, which have details about fire prevention measures, fire protection and fire procedures. So within that, we're trying to reiterate the message, but I do get that sometimes people do use the communal areas. As Doug says, we're taking action as well as doing that resident engagement.
Do we have a, if you allow me, Chairman,
yes,
may I follow the question on the same topic?
Yes, please.
Do we have a timetable? Do we have a time limit when you issue the first warning and the second warning? How much time do you need before taking further action to remove the material completely?
Sorry, we would remove the material if it's in the communal area. The risk is the local authorities. We have the statutory duty, so we would remove it. We wouldn't usually leave it there so usually you would give people a matter of days to remove it. If not, we will remove it. And we have recently recharged a few residents, because we've now got a recharge policy for having to dispose of it. Sometimes people will put all sorts of stuff into the communal area, such as their building works and the rest of what's going on, and we've had to dispose of that and recharge it. But we won't leave things there.
Thank you. I now would like to call Councillor Greg Hammond, please. Greg.
Thanks very much, Chair, and may I also congratulate the lead member and thank all the officers for the work that's gone into this paper and the underlying measures that are being taken. I realise there's more to do, but there's a lot of progress reported here. It is a living document, so I'm sure we'll want to see it back again at some point later in the council year. But I will say that to further my thanks to Mr. Todd, particularly that when it didn't make the cut on the July Select Committee meeting, I did put in a very long list of questions and some supplementaries, and I got some excellent answers from Mr. Todd out of committee, and thank you very much for that, for those, Keith. I think it's something that we want to take forward in the working group in more detail, and I think we as a committee ought to be doing some visits to see some of these measures that you're taking. Clearly, the time is not propitious necessarily to arrange that right now with the pandemic going on, but I think it's something that we as a committee ought to be aiming to do, and possibly at the working group. So those are more statements than questions. I do have a couple of questions related to paragraph 4.1, which refers to the resident safety panel. I'm just wondering who they are and how they were chosen, please.
Doug?
Hi. Yep, that's one for me. So initially the resident safety panel was made up of chairs of residents associations from the Tenants Consultative Committee, but it's been expanded to include, so we've put some things on our publicity and on our newsletters to say that these things are there, and so we've asked people to give their email addresses if they're interested. So there are about 300 people. They don't come all the time, but they get information that have come to us and said, yes, we'd like to know what's happening, and we keep informed. So we only get a handful though that turn up actually to the meetings, but we've got quite a lot of people on that mailing list.
So it is kind of a free for all. If people are interested, they can
Absolutely.
take part in it.
Absolutely.
And it's well publicised.
It was only last week because we had a meeting last week which wasn't super well attended. So I think we're going to republicise that, Councillor.
Thanks very much, Doug. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like now to call Councillor Tom Bennett. Tom.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to touch quickly on housing association properties. So, I mean, as Councillor Hammond was saying, this paper sets out some really fantastic work we're doing in our own properties. But I know from many discussions with residents that sometimes some housing associations can take a bit of a slapdash attitude towards the quality of the accommodation, and fire safety being such a crucial point. I wonder, are we engaging with housing associations to try and ensure that they're making their accommodation as safe as possible from a fire safety point of view?
Chair, I wonder if I might step in and answer that, because in fairness to Keith and Doug, they are mostly preoccupied with council housing. So there's a couple of answers to that. We do have roles, kind of regulatory roles, if you like, in terms of building safety across the borough, both kind of through the environmental health team and through the building control team. And I've actually recently convened a group of officers to make sure that we're doing exactly what you described, that we're trying to apply as much as possible these standards, because, as you say, it shouldn't have to matter to a resident who their landlord is. They should be able to expect the same level of safety and the same level of care. And I think we have a role, obviously primarily to show leadership in the work that Doug and Keith are doing, but then also to show some kind of wider local leadership and to use our regulatory powers where necessary and where possible to make sure that housing associations are doing the same thing. I mean, I think, as is often the case with these situations, particularly, of course, over the last 3 years, I think in fairness, most housing associations are doing this okay most of the time. Our job is to find out where that's not happening, and to use a combination of exploiting our good relationships with them and then, where necessary, flexing our muscles and then very occasionally using them if we have to. We have actually recently both employed a new member of staff in my team specifically to work on our relationships with housing associations, and as you'll imagine, building safety is a major priority for that work. We've also been working closely with environmental health in making sure that the work that they're doing on housing safety and housing regulation is kind of properly covering the housing association sector.
That's very encouraging. Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. I would now like to call Councillor Dore Schmatzling. Dore. Yeah, take your time, Dore.
Thank you, Chair. I really, thank you. In fact, I had a couple of questions, but actually they've been answered, so that's good. I just would like to add a note here regarding the fire safety issues, and also some of the things regarding the London Fire Brigade that were mentioned in the report. At the housing conference I attended last month, I was offered free evaluation of what is said to be the most advanced three-dimensional modelling software available. I just want to mention that, and the idea is that this is shared with the London Fire Brigade, or any fire brigade, and indeed it's also a way for residents to have a much better idea of what the building looks like, where things are, and how to go through it, because it's a 3D model of everything except maybe the smallest detail. Now, I'm pleased to say the housing department is now aware of it, and we are just awaiting comments, which I hope will happen fairly soon, from another housing association in the Midlands, which was heavily involved in the development of the software. And I hope that it may or may not provide be good for us, but I just thought that there's something there which is a lot to do with fire safety. That is something going on in the background. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Please, that was mostly about a comment rather than a question. And yes, Dore, you and I are probably attending the next conference, the 20th and the 22nd of this month, Pyrons and Building Safety. So I look forward to that conference with you. So it'll be a virtual conference for a few days, and hopefully get more opportunities to scrutinize our own fire and building safety team, so that we can provide a world-class service for that. Yes, Councillor Councillor Hamish Jorian, please. Hamish, any question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I wanted to ask about the regular testing of fire lifts and fire doors and a couple of other fire-related equipment in council properties. Who actually carries out those regular checks, and how are records kept? And I suppose the important question really is, what would happen if a failure was found?
So I can start. Oh, sorry, Kim. So in terms of we have a process for regular checks in terms of lifts, and I can bring Keith in terms of fire doors, because we've been that was quite a topic of debate at this week's Tenants Consultative Committee in terms of how that might operate. But on lifts, so for instance, we used to only get lifts to be checked quarterly. That's now done monthly, and it's done in conjunction with the fire brigade, who come on site. Actually, Keith can answer this one as well. So we have been through all the plant, if you like, and on our estates, and gone through that with a fine-tooth comb to check that the regulation and governance of that is up to date. And that is called over. Well, every 2 weeks I have a meeting which calls over compliance, and so that will come once a month just to check that everything is kept up to date. Actually, I'll bring in Keith. He'd probably probably explain it a bit better than I can.
Yeah, so we've got an agreed process with London Fire Brigade, which we adopted straight after the phase 1 report was issued from the public inquiry, whereby we carry out a monthly test of every lift, and we report any failures or any issues with the lift to the fire brigade straight away through an agreed protocol. So that's in place already and is working well. In terms of fire doors and fire door checks, again, we tried to respond in a practical and quite a quick way to the findings of the public inquiry. And we changed the specification for our new flat entrance fire doors to put the self-closers on the outside of the doors to enable us to carry out a quarterly visual check of the doors. And my team have actually carried out training to the caretakers to enable them to be able to carry out that visual check. That training will also be or we're hoping it's going to be third-party accredited by the Fire Industry Association. So we're in the process of sending off all our training materials that my team has produced to get them third-party certificated as being appropriate training. So hopefully we'll have that within the next few weeks. Since then, the consultation has come out. Now, the consultation has slightly adapted the recommendations from the Phase 1 report to take a height-based approach to carrying out door checks. And what it says is for buildings over 18 metres, the government is consulting on whether it's practical to get into every flat in every building over 18 metres to carry out the door check every 6 months, and the same process for buildings over 11 metres every year. Now that has raised some challenges, and again, as Kim alluded to when he introduced the paper, we discussed the matter with the Tenant Consultative Committee on Tuesday night, and we had some feedback from residents. Now, as you can imagine, some residents I don't think want us in their flats every 6 months, so I think we'll wait and see. But in the meantime, we're pushing ahead with training up our staff to be able to carry out quarterly visual checks, because as you're probably aware, the recommendation in the Phase 1 report generally came out of the fact that there were a lot of doors at Grenfell Tower which had deficiencies which were either not fire resisting correctly, or in the case of self-closers, approximately 56% of self-closers were either missing or defective. So if we can carry out that visual check, obviously we have some assurance that the closer is in place and that the door, to some extent at least, appears to be safe. But I'm happy to take any other questions on that.
Just to clarify that then, it's the on-site caretakers, therefore, who will be doing a visual check on the fire doors on a regular basis.
Sorry, can I just come in? So that's from the external side. Sorry, let me put my camera on. The one thing that we did have, which was left out of that equation, was we have the visiting officers that would go around annually and physically check the door to close. So they were making quite good progress until C19. We stopped it for a bit, it restarted, and now it's sort of on pause at the moment. So we are guaranteeing an annual visit to check the doors, so you can physically check it, but you can check weekly by a caretaker to make sure no one's removed.
Thank you.
Thank you. I will now ask, I think all councillors have asked questions. Just a brief question from my side. You've mentioned in terms of the work done, the tenants consultation, and I would like to make it on the record that I have requested the tenants consultation meetings with other tenants, residents associations, and the chairs of residents chairs. Sorry, let me get that right. The chairs of the resident associations to take part, and I have asked specifically for councillors, for the officers to invite me. That hasn't happened for some time, so I would like on the record on this to be minuted as well, so that if Kim and other officers can invite me and my committee to the resident association meetings where important issues such as fire risk management or any other issues that the resident association chairs wants to talk about, so that we can also know areas that they are really interested in and areas that we can also scrutinize. on another platform rather than just being a consultation period. So that is a comment from my end.
Very happy to confirm an invitation to you, Kasim. You'll also, as both a resident and a councillor and as the chairman of our scrutiny committee, I only warn you is that the meeting we had this week lasted 3 hours long.
I would not mind. Thank you very much.
But yes, it's a good meeting.
I do appreciate, but also the committee to be invited if some of them are willing to come along. Since we are scrutinizing housing and communities, I would appreciate if that invitation to be extended to my committee as well, so that some of them can get to know more details about it. That's that. I'm
sure Doug will note.
Yeah,
thank
you, Doug and Kim. On another note, take me through.
I'm doing email now.
Thank you. Take me through briefly to the budgeting on this. And I know we've taken repairs in-house.
Can I not ask my question?
Yes, you will come to. I haven't finished with the committee. I'm sorry, Judith, if you felt that way, but I will make it quick. Just briefly, take me through to the budgeting side of it. I know just over 10 million have been put aside for the. How did you come to that point of just over 10 million for the repairs? Is it external team doing it, or is it just the council offices and the council team working on it?
Again, I'll let Doug cover that.
So in terms of the budget, what we need to do has come out of the fire risk assessments that we've undertaken. So we carry out regular fire risk assessments, and out of that it will highlight any deficiencies that we then need to upgrade. So you've heard about the fact that we need to do some dry risers and wet risers. We've got an alarm scheme. We've got fire doors. There's quite a lot of work in terms of funding, if you like, in terms of fire safety, and that's how we build our budget together. What I would say is actually the spend is probably more than that. What will happen is new things will come to our attention, and then we need to make provisions to deal with that. And that will come out of fire risk assessments, which are reactive in many cases. So for instance, we've noticed some walkways that have been enclosed, which haven't been picked up on previous fire risk assessments, but have now, and they were enclosed with windows which aren't correct, if you like. So we've had to change some of those. So these things will come up, and we have to make the right budget provision, because ultimately we need to make sure that the properties are safe.
Thank you. Again, this is a living document, and it will continue. Perhaps this will not be the last time for this committee to talk about the housing and building safety. Thank you, Councillor Judith Blakeman. You are the first to speak after the committee members. So I haven't forgotten you, but I was just finishing with the committee first, and then you're the first to ask the questions. Please take the floor.
Okay, sorry, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to ask about the personal emergency evacuation plans, because the report says they're going to be prepared for people living on properties over 18 metres. But there are also a lot of residents living on properties under 18 metres who also need personal emergency evacuation plans. And obviously these are people who probably in the long term need to be transferred to other housing on ground floor, but in the meantime they need PEEPs. Are they going to have them?
Keith or Doug?
So Keith, in the chat it's actually directed to you, and I know that this question or this answer came up on Tuesday.
Yes, it's a very good point, Councillor Blakeman, and again, to refer back to the emergency plan leaflets that we've just issued, we have raised the importance of people getting in touch if they need assistance, and we've plastered our telephone number and contact details all over there. So we are trying to reach out to residents of buildings of every building height who might need assistance, because it's appropriate, as you say, to plan for anyone that might need help coming out. So I think our initial focus was on the higher rise buildings, but you're exactly right. We will obviously engage with anyone that needs our help in any of our buildings. Does that help?
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Mo Bakhtiar, your hand is still up. I'm sure that was the first one, or you want to have a quick question again before we summarize?
I am sorry, this is the old one. I don't have any questions.
Thank you. Yes, thank you again, lead member, for your time, and officers for putting together the work that you have done so far already, specifically on the relating to the BAFE SP 205 certificate, which is the external body. And again, we've also talked about the tenants consultant meetings that I will be invited along with my committee, anyone who may have the time to attend for the meetings, and hopefully to learn more about the areas that the residents association chairs wants to get involved. The points also have been raised during this meeting includes the fire and water safety, not just fire, but also water safety, especially new buildings and the buildings that are higher than 50 meters, and a wet race will be on the agenda for the team to work with on officers. And again, residents leaving flammable material in a communal area will be targeted, and the council will take the leadership on this and make sure that no dangerous or anything that harming other residents are left unattended. Regular testing also to be talked about, and who carries out the regular testing and who keeps the information or the data that has been collected have also been in the discussion. And finally, emergency plan, and to contact those who may need an assistance specifically for the high-rise buildings on this issue in terms of fire and risk management. I think that concludes for this agenda item, and happy to continue to another agenda item. But thank you again, housing team and its lead member, for putting together this. I am sure before we finish this meeting, we will call you one more time, but bear with us. Now I would like to go to agenda A7, removing barriers to civic participation. I must say the topic I wasn't expecting, but the title of the title of the topic was we talked about inclusion, but this is a fancy name, and I hope it will live up to its name. And I must say I've read the report, and I was encouraged by what I have seen and what I've read. Rather than talking about work that has been done in the past, the lead member have taken the leadership to share with us what will be done in the future, so that this committee, the housing and working group, working as selective committee, will have input for the future work. And again, I would like to invite Councillor Ansaran and Director or the Director of Communities, Tunde, to come to us and give us. You can share the platform, either one of you can give, or the questions will be asked at both of you, so you can share the questions as well as the report briefing. Again, I will invite to anyone who wants to speak first.
Well, thank you, Chair. I think I will start, and I like the idea that this has got a fancy name. It is all about inclusion. And I mean, I'm really pleased to be introducing this paper to the committee tonight. The subject matter is really close to my heart, and I think that engaging with our residents and inclusiveness is really important. And I think particularly we want to hear from those that we don't hear from often or ever. And I think this will really improve what we do at this council. And as you've said, Chair, scrutiny is often about things that have happened in the past, and tonight we're bringing this paper on what we plan to do to remove barriers to working with our residents and communities. And I'm really happy to have the opportunity to have this committee input on this. So thank you very much, Chair, for requesting this item. We all know that we've rightly made a commitment to ensure that all our residents, regardless of their background, beliefs or characteristics, can shape the services that support their quality of life and opportunities to fulfill their potential. And we're committed to this. It's part of having an adult-to-adult relationship with our residents. It leads to better services, better solutions, and I think better outcomes, and it empowers our communities. And it really importantly, I think it brings people with us, and it makes them a part of what we're doing here at the council, and it gives them ownership. I think local people rightly expect to have a say on things that affect them and their families and their communities. And I think we all appreciate that and agree that healthy democracy goes beyond people voting. So what do we mean by the idea of civic participation and resident involvement? I mean, some residents obviously want to volunteer or serve their community in that way, and we encourage and support this. But I think importantly for me, resident involvement is about co-design, and we also call it co-production. And this is really about partnering with our residents and working together to get solutions. And I think we have some good emerging examples on how we are doing this. And I've often said on some of the examples, they're things that we would never have done before. So I'm really quite proud of that. And we are learning. And I think it is a process, and the more that we do it, the better we will get on it. I think this report is also a statement of intent, which is about ensuring that no communities face barriers to participation. And we've seen through COVID and recently through the Black Lives Matters movement that that's really shone a light on disproportionate outcomes faced by many of our communities. And it's really rightly encouraged us to think again and explore again and make sure that our services and our policies do not systemically discriminate. And our engagement with our Black and minority ethnic groups, which we've described in the paper, and I'm sure we'll talk about, is going to be a big part of discussing this, of addressing this. And we've already started that discussion with some of the voluntary and community organisations who represent these groups. And we're also working on a wider equality strategy, and there will be more updates on this in the coming weeks. I think we've talked about data, and I think we really have to understand our borough and have a clear picture of what our demographic is and who uses our services. So I think this will be a part of the work. And we also plan to work with our community leaders and advocacy groups to access communities to really understand what the barriers are. I think, I mean, it is an emerging plan. I mean, you will see there is more detail that's required. And I think a lot of that is going to be determined with our communities through some of our open forums and our youth forums and community champions and the Youth Council and our VCS network and, you know, all of those other channels that we work with to reach our residents. I must say that, you know, this has been challenging over the last 6 months, and I think it will continue to be challenging, not least because, you know, many of our people have been redeployed to help with the response, but also we just haven't been able to meet with people and bring people together in the large groups that we're sort of used to, that normally we would have those discussions in. So I did want to actually ask our Director of Communities, Tunde Olayinka, to give a little bit more introduction to the specific plans that we have on some of those barriers before we open up to questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Tunde.
Hi, and really pleased to be here and addressing the committee. I think Councillor Siren has summed up a lot of what I was going to say, actually. I think central to the work that we're doing is that we're creating this dedicated team called the Community Empowerment Team, which will consist of community development officers, but also specific youth participation officers. There's 3 areas that they'll be working on. One will be about, as Anne said, understanding our borough, understanding the demographics. We'll be using data, but we'll also be going out and about and using our own networks to determine that. The work with community leaders and advocacy groups is going to be really crucial to our work, and this will be, I guess there's 3 aims that we want to get at. One is being able to access communities directly engage, particularly those that we haven't, for whatever reason, engaged with well before. We want to use that engagement to determine the barriers, and then we want to be able to co-create solutions to ensure that everyone can take part in civic life in Kensington and Chelsea. And then I guess the third part is this work, as Anne says, there has to be an evidence base, and we will need to, in order for us to understand how well we're doing at this, we will need to be able to see to go to all of our engagement forums and our civic participation initiatives and see who is actually attending and who isn't. Only by doing that and gathering that evidence, we will see who's being left behind. So one of the big bits of work that we will need to do going forward in this plan is work with directly with communities, their advocates and community leaders, to co-design, come up with solutions for non-intrusive data collection, so that we can just really, if we find that there's groups that don't seem to be engaging, we can then reach out to them to remove those barriers. And again, Anne rightly said that a lot of the detail in this plan, a lot of the detail in this report, there's a lot of detail that needs to go into this report, and that's because that detail will be determined by our engagement. Another thing worth mentioning is the citizens panel, which is in the report. Again, this is one of our showpiece initiatives to ensure that we can get a representative group of civic-minded residents to come together and be able to, for us to be able to do some surveys with them, consultations, and just get a snapshot of what the sentiment is that's been that our communities may have, as well as any views on our council plan or future priorities. So really pleased that we have identified a digital platform in order to do this, and that we are actually in the process of procuring it and getting it embedded. There'll be elements of the citizens panel that we will need to look at in terms of digital inclusion or exclusion, and overcoming those barriers as well. To finish off, Anne spoke about the specific engagement that we're going to be doing with BAME communities, which came out of the June Public Health England report, which showed the disproportionality that many of our Black and ethnic minorities and other minorities suffered as a result of COVID. And this was really an amplification of issues that were there already. We also know that the recent Black Lives Matter movement also highlighted issues related to the day-to-day experience of BAME people. So we are working with Public Health and colleagues in CCG to do a joint engagement plan around specifically looking at the disproportionate impact of COVID, health needs of residents, but particularly BAME residents, and also to understand how to explore community-led solutions to it. The work program that this paper speaks of is incredibly ambitious, and it's something that we haven't done perhaps to this extent in Kensington and Chelsea before. So it's going to take a lot of planning, but it's really needed, and it's the way forward for the way that we want to work in this newly formed communities department. So I will probably stop there, because I'm sure that there's many questions that people will want to ask to both me and to Councillor Siren.
Thank you. I'm sure there will be questions. If I start some of the questions with myself, first of all, I do welcome the report, as I said, and I thank you, both you and the lead member, for putting together this paper for us and for the committee to read about it. Yes, I understand that you also, Tunde, have lived in the borough for a long time, and you know what it feels to be working in an area where you grow up and the area that you have roots. The reason I'm mentioning this to you, I know it's how important it is to you to work in a community that you're related to, or that you can feel that you're related to. You've mentioned in here the managers, apart from the consultation and the panel, which you've mentioned up to 1,000 people that you want to get to involve, and the surveys and everything else that's required. But what I'm after is the community engagement team or community empowerment team. And you've mentioned the community empowerment manager, community development officer ×3, and the youth participation ×2 to transfer. So I want to know, those employment, will you be creating an employment opportunities for the communities that is left behind or that feels is left behind? Will you be given an opportunities to offer an employment within your departments, locally, home, and grow up people that they can understand when they're working in the north, central, or the south of the borough, that they pretty much related to, and as much as you do. And no offenses to the other officers, senior officers who have been supporting the council and have been working. We do appreciate your value, but you understand where we're coming from. We want the BAME community specifically to feel, to understand, and it's in line with what the council, the motion the council has passed, local jobs for local people. And I'm sure talent, we will call wherever they are to come and work for us, and we thank them for those who apply jobs, but most importantly, for under the leadership of Ansaren, and of course under your leadership, Tunde, as a senior person in the department. What is your plan for these jobs to be created, and specifically at least 70% of them to be felt by homegrown talents, if not train them to become homegrown talents? Because any person can be trained, whether you are black, white, you name it, different colors. It's about human beings. That's one point. The second, and mainly for Ansaren, will be, can you also work with other lead members of the council and to come up some sort of a grant to, or maybe financial support for the communities, especially the BAME communities that I'm referring to set up their own businesses and to help feel they're part of RBKC, so that they too can have set up their own community-led businesses, community-led programs that encourage the next, the next generation, and hopefully one day that I don't have to be the only black man in the council as selected, as elected councillor, so that we can have different races. 1/3 of our community here in RBKC, as the report shows, is the BAME members, and it's sad that I'm the only official, black man elected here. So coming back, all I'm raising this, when we were setting up this meeting, I did not have in mind that this is going to be October month, the Black History Month. Although I would like to be everyone to talk about and learn about races, we should be valuing talents wherever they come from, rather than the color of their skin. But we also have to recognize the communities that have left it behind. And for that reason, those two questions, one to Ansaren, of working with other lead members, setting up a grant-based businesses for Black and Asian communities in the borough, and the other ones, the resources we have already in the borough, and employ those offices that you have mentioned. And if they're not ready, make them ready. Thank you.
I'm happy to go first, and if we answer in the order that you asked, I think that was a really powerful point you made, Councillor, in relation to local people and ensuring that local people get opportunities. So before answering your question specifically, I just want to say that we are working with HR within the council to create an apprenticeship. We've got lots of apprenticeships in the council, but we're working specifically to create community development apprenticeships now. We're right at the beginning of this because I'm a qualified community development worker. There's a skill to it. And what we have found when we've employed very good people with community knowledge and belonging to the community, from all parts of Kensington and Chelsea. So we're not north centric because, as the paper shows, we're very diverse. There has been challenges that some of our workers have had in relation to issues of distrust from which understandably fell out from Grenfell, and being part of the council, but yet part of the community. So the second piece of work that we are doing, which led by a local community development officer known to both of us, is working on a package to support people to overcome that, so that when people join from our local community, they're given the additional support that they're needed in order to thrive and, like myself, progress to senior positions, because that's where we will be able to influence and be truly representative. So in terms of the employment opportunities for this specific team, Resourcing in Kensington and Chelsea is difficult at this moment because of the financial situation that we're in. This team is going to be repurposed from our wider team. So we've identified some officers that are going to be repurposed. The one vacancy is the community empowerment manager that's gone out to advert. What I do know is that going forward, there's going to be a bit of churn in our team. We will definitely be reaching out to people with community reach, community knowledge, in the broadest sense. Going forward. So that's basically the answer to that. The 2 youth participation officers are actually being transferred from children's services. One of them I worked with in the youth service all those years ago, knows our communities really, really well and lives close by. And then just lastly, in relation to our department and our staff members, I'm really proud that we've probably got, I don't have the stats for it, but we've got lots of local people working in the communities department already. Like I said before, I think what we really want to do is make sure that they're supported to thrive within the council.
Thank you.
So just to follow up on your second question, this is certainly something that I will take away and discuss with the other lead members. Your question specifically about the grant for BAME communities, BAME residents to set up their own businesses. I mean, I think it's also something that we would certainly be looking at within our BAME engagement. So this is going to be we're going to work with local residents to really understand what some of those barriers are. And I'm sure the one that you've mentioned is one of those barriers. So I think it's something that we can consider within that. But, I will certainly take that point away and discuss it with the other relevant lead members.
Thank you. Thank you. Now I will open to the members of the select committee. If I can start with Doris Matling. Dory.
Hi, sorry, I just had to change my source of Wi-Fi. I just went to phone only because it was dropping. Thank you. My question is to, I suppose, both Councillor Siren and Kinga. Given the difficulty of recruiting people to engage, and I've attended a number of these residents' engagement meetings myself, held in the town hall and elsewhere. In general, being so difficult to get people to participate, is your target of this month and next, well, let's say by the end of next month, of 1,000 people set up all over the borough? Isn't that rather ambitious, over-ambitious?
Thank you, Dory. I'm going to ask Tunde to just talk a little bit more about the citizens panel, and I see we've got a comment about the citizens panel, and it is something that we have done before, although I believe that what we're going to do now is going to be a much better version of that. But I do think the point that you make about people, residents wanting to engage and getting them to engage, it is difficult. And I think for me, it's really about, I think if people believe that, they're going to be listened to and that we're going to genuinely listen and take what they say and use it and have it input into, what we're actually doing here, they're going to be more encouraged to come and participate. I mean, nobody wants to waste their time, right? So I think the proof is in what you do as a result of those engagements. And I hope that when residents start to see that they can influence some of these things, then they're going to be more enthusiastic about having those conversations with us. So that's how I would sort of answer the overall point. But I think it is an important one because people have busy lives. Now with this whole COVID situation, people have lots of concerns, financial health, uncertainty. I don't think engaging with the council is always going to be top of their mind. It's not something that they probably wake up in the morning and want to do. So we have to make it worth their while. And we have to show them that, there's going to be change and there's going to be progress because of their involvement, and I think that's sort of why we're here. You know, we want to do that. We want it to. I mean, as I said, I think we get to better solutions, we get to better outcomes when people are involved in what we're doing. So, you know, that is certainly the intent, but I certainly, you know, don't think it is easy, and I don't think it's something that we're going to achieve quickly. But, you know, perhaps I just get Tunde to talk a little bit about the citizens panel and the mechanics of it.
Sure.
Could I just add into that? May I ask, just before you answer that question today, is that the importance would be also to get a cross-section or reasonable cross-section of the population of the borough. And secondly, the fact is that and thankfully, otherwise we'd have to multiply our staff in the council. But the vast majority of people are not really interested because they just pay their council tax. They no longer have to engage paying their parking permit because they do it online and it's all automatic. So, I mean, bearing all this in mind, how do you get a cross-section and 1,000? So over to you.
Thank you. I think you've highlighted some significant difficulties. I would say that my experience during COVID has told me that people do want to get involved. It's almost like a COVID dividend. I mean, we've seen during the COVID response, we've had 1,700 volunteers sign up. We have set up various forums that have been well attended, and there's been a lot of participation, and this has been digitally. So I do think that people do want to get involved, and there is a civic spirit that we have in Kensington and Chelsea that we can harness. But I think there's lots of barriers, and this is what this report's about. I mean, there can be a lack of awareness of different ways that people can get involved. We know that there's language barriers sometimes. We've spoken that some community members may have a lack of trust or cynicism that anything will change. And also there's the time of day that civic opportunities or getting involved takes place. You know, that can exclude lots of people if they've got caring commitments and so on. But certainly in relation to some of the meetings that we've held by Zoom, we've been quite encouraged by the amount of people who've been able to attend. And so again, a lot of this work will be dependent on us working with VCS groups, local leaders, councillors, to understand these and get access to groups and just understand what the barriers are. Speaking more about the citizens panel, as I said, we've got this digital platform that we've bought. We've looked at other local authorities and how they've gone about it. We will have to do a lot of work to encourage people to take part and to register to it. But I'm quite confident, and particularly just because of my experiences. I've been within the borough now, my second time in the borough as director for 6 months. And the response that we've had just in relation to COVID engagement has really been encouraging.
Thank you, Tunde, for that. Dora, do you want a quick follow-up question?
Yes, I do. Two things. One is a point, the other one is the question. The point is that many residents don't even know the name of their councillors. And that's not because of lack of effort, it's just that's the way it is. But the thing about the COVID, the engagement, the encouragement that you feel with the COVID engagement is, I think that's my opinion. And I hope I'm wrong. But my opinion is that all this engagement we're getting because of COVID-19 is a single issue engagement. There are many things going on, and it's like people saying massive shifts in how we work and massive shift in this. I think it will not happen. It might take a year or two to get back to nearly where we were, but I don't think that what we see during this COVID-19 crisis, where people are under threat, I mean, their lives are at threat. Many of them have their lives under threat. So of course they will pull together, and get involved and so on. But once all this kind of goes away, I think that'll be the difficulty in, even if we collect a lot of people, the difficulty getting a cross-section of lots to attend. And I hope I'm completely wrong, but maybe you'd like to comment.
I'm happy to come back unless Councillor Siren does. I'm probably going to comment, Councillor Dorey, with a question. Why what made you get involved in public life?
That's a good question. Well, I've been involved in quite a lot in local affairs, in the local conservation society for many years, and I just felt that I could do more and put myself up for election. And blow me, I got elected. Here we are.
So we had, like I said, we've got 1,700 volunteers. Some of them had not. We have a neighbourly group that we actually called, where we've been meeting each week with sort of mutual aid leads and I've forgotten what the lots of different organisations or collectives of groups. And these have been people that we had never seen before in the community engagement team. And we've just had a sentiment survey. It was a small sample. It was like 653 people returned. We asked in it how many of you have volunteered. I think, don't quote me on the figures, I think about 60% of them said that they've volunteered and they're willing to do so. There is a civic spirit. It's about us harnessing it, because I personally, in some of the debates and discussions that I've attended, have heard people actually want to know more about the borough, particularly we're such a diverse borough, just geographically, but particularly wanted to know what's going on in this area. I didn't know this was happening. So I'm confident and optimistic, but again, it's going to be down to the civic spirit of the folk, the good folk of this borough.
Indeed,
Thanks very much. I hope you're right, because it'll be for all of our benefit.
And I'm sure you will not only meet the 1,000, but hopefully will pass this time to, show the selection committee that you are actually on this topic. Greg Hammond, Councillor Greg Hammond, please answer the question. You have one or two questions. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair, and thanks very much to the lead member and director for your incisive introductions and the very interesting answers that you've just given, and all the work that you're doing. I was going to ask how you attempt to reach the silent majority, but that don't normally participate. But I think you've done justice to that question in your answers to Councillor Schmetterling, unless you want to add anything more, of course. But there was one point of detail I wanted to ask on the citizens panel, and that's how you'll go about trying to get an equitable distribution in that panel between the 18 wards, because I think it'd be wrong for any area to get missed out for whatever reason, and they all need to have their voices heard on that. So over to you. Thank you. So
I'll touch upon the first question actually that you asked. We've got existing networks already, we work quite closely with Kensington Chelsea Social Council and various other sort of advocacy groups, Action Disability, our volunteering network, and they usually have quite a lot of insight into sort of harder to reach groups. I don't like using the word harder to reach because that puts the blame on them, but groups that have barriers to participation. We also have an interfaith forum attended by some of our faith leaders. Again, when I last worked here in the youth service, our demographic data showed that we had quite a large Filipino population, but in order to engage them in our youth services, we actually went to the Catholic churches where they attended. So there are lots of different ways. We've also got people like yourselves, good counsellors, who will come across people through your surgeries, etc. And some of our council departments as well. So our children's department works a lot with travellers. So we've got networks and ways in. It's just us having a plan to reach out to these groups and I guess give them early wins in showing that participating in civic life you can actually make a difference and improve the community. In terms of the citizens panel, one of the things that got signed off as part of it is that it has to have a ward by ward segmentation. So I think that's just answering your question. Of course, it's going to be demographically representative, but what we would hope to do, because many of our initiatives like City Living and Local Life and NCIL are actually ward or area based. So in order to ensure that we've got some good representation, we are going to be looking at creating ward by ward segmentation that is as representative. There's going to be challenges to this. We haven't quite scoped how we're going to do it. Some of the options that we're looking at is getting an organisation in to help us with that recruitment, but also again, as I've emphasised before, working in partnerships with councillors, with groups that we know have access to it. So it's a big work programme, but it's something that's important. Just as a point of clarity, I think for the former question, we're not expecting to have it launched 1,000 people by November. It's February that we're trying to launch it. But this will all be dependent on the impact COVID has on our plans.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think you've answered the question, and now we'll move to Councillor Hamish Adorian.
Thank you, Chair. I have a series of 3 questions, if I may, and I'll ask them one by one. The first one really is just a quick and short and simple one. What's the definition of an excluded demographic group, to quote the report? How do you define that?
And I think if you ask your 3 questions in one go, and hopefully both the lead member, if necessary, or...
I think that would be a bit tricky, if I may, Chair. I mean, my third one in particular is a little bit complex, and I think the answers...
Okay, we'll make it short.
You clarify the other one. It may not be necessary to answer, if that's okay. Thank you.
That's fine. Tunde or Sarah, if anyone wants to respond to that, make it short answers, please, if you don't mind.
I think that's, for me, in terms of excluded, I'm not making any presumptions, and that's why the report was very clear that it didn't name any groups. The fact is we haven't got an evidence base because we rarely collect that sort of data. If you're thinking about the listening forum who attends that, the Grenfell Assembly, who speaks at council, we don't collect that data. So we will start off by looking at our demographic data from our census and from GLA predictions, and then we will start, a big part of this will be data collection, seeing who turns up and comparing that to our demographic data, and that will tell us who's not participating.
Thank you. Hamish, is that answers the question?
Thank you, yes, and that very nicely does lead me on to my second question. So I understand, yes, we want to collect all this new data on demographic groups and how they are or aren't engaging with the council. But how are we then going to avoid the risk of getting into the position where we start treating residents primarily as members of demographic groups, I mean, a minority otherwise, rather than individuals?
I think that's a challenge. That's a good question to ask. The only way I can answer that is everybody's an individual, but there's patterns, and it's about us looking at patterns. And if we see that, for example, I'm working on the COVID response, and one of the things that we've noted is that the demographic age between 20 and 35, there's not many forums that we tend to engage there. We engage very young people and older folk, but not necessarily that. So I think that will be in the attitude and the professionalism of our staff. Will see people as individuals, whereas the data will show us patterns of exclusion.
Indeed. Dorian, Hamish, if you have a final one.
I do. I mean, I think we could discuss that point in some detail, and hope we'll have some opportunity later on at a meeting to discuss that. Yes, my last one really is on the community empowerment team. Now, it appears that their focus will be on improving civic participation, to quote the report, for excluded demographic groups, and obviously that's a hugely laudable aim, as is obviously improving civic participation in general across the borough, and we've already had a little bit of some comments about that. But given all the other challenges we're facing, given the situation with the pandemic, with the state of the economy, I'd just like to ask how you envisage the work that will be done by the community empowerment manager and their team on civic participation specifically will, tangibly improve life opportunities of disadvantaged or excluded individuals at this time.
Yeah, if I've understood the question correctly, there are so many it's been documented. There's so many benefits in terms of mental health, in terms of sense of well-being, when you are able to volunteer or serve within your community and improve life quality, as well as feel a sense of ownership of and the ability to create services and policy direction and influence policy direction for both individuals. Secondly, I think lots of issues that different groups and residents face are very knotty and they're very complex, but the solution to these issues lies with them. So I think what you're saying, and if I've understood it right, is you're presenting a challenge to say, will involving communities on shaping the issues that they face and the services that help overcome any issues, or simply just improving quality of life, like we have with the City Living and Local Life grant system. Will there be a tangible difference? We've put this report together. This is our intention, and I guess we will see. But I'm confident. I don't know if Councillor Siren has anything else to add on that.
I think that's really well put.
Sorry, if I may just clarify my comment there. I think we all agree entirely, I'm sure, across party in terms of involving communities. I don't think there's any doubts around that. It's more the question of the approach and the way in which that's being done. But I'm sure we'll be hearing updates from you in forthcoming meetings, and we look forward to that.
I can assure you, Councillor Hamish Al-Darian, that this will be a continuous program. We will be scrutinizing the work of the community's lead member as well as the senior officers. So yes, we may not have it this time every answer to the questions that the committee has, but we will make sure that over the next 8 to 9 months the scrutiny continues, and rest assured that we will get to the bottom of questions necessary. I think Anne wants to add, Councillor Siren wants to add to that point.
I thank you, Chair. I didn't really want to add, but I think Tunde summarised it really well. I mean, that is our intention. We believe there are benefits to it. I think we look forward to coming again and showing what we've learned.
Thank you. And before I go to and give the platform to Councillor Mohammed Bakhtiar, I just want to make this quick point. The time is now 20:53, and this meeting is scheduled to end at 9 o'clock. I will not end at 9 o'clock. The plan for me, I wanted to continue with this commitment, and this at least the items that we have on the agenda. So although I haven't shared with you at the beginning, I was expecting this meeting will run to 9:30, and I hope that you will bear with us because this this is the second meeting in 10 months. So for this scrutiny committee. And yes, the agenda is long enough, but I'm sure we will be able to finish at 9:30, and I hope everyone will be bearing with us. Councillor Mo Bakhtiar.
Thank you, Chairman. My question is about, we are talking about engagement, and as you've mentioned rightly, we have a policy of local jobs for local people. And this is another way of engaging, and the whole purpose of passing this motion, the motion, and turned into a policy was because we felt collectively, all councillors across party, that this is something missing we need to work on. So I know we are going through rough times, and we haven't been functioning the past 6 years in a way that we should, and it's going to be like this for another year, maybe at least for March or April. So I think it's the time. I know it doesn't fall under your committee, but it's a cross committee. I think this policy. If we plan from now, because we will lose so many jobs, or at least some jobs in the council, it's a good time to plan something ahead to fill the gap next year this time by locals, if we had any gaps, any jobs in the council, and try to train locals, school leavers or young graduated young graduates who live locally or whoever, specifically youngs who are desperate for jobs. Could we do something about this?
Before the lead member or the director answers, I would say, yes, Councillor Mo Bakhtiar, you're right. This is not the committee for the local economy. The overall overview scrutiny committee, overall scrutiny committee has that power to scrutinize. However, getting in touch and reaching out to our communities is what we are talking about here. And I'm sure one way to reach out to the community is to create opportunities. And I think on that angle, and Saran Councillor Saran could respond to that question. And yeah. Sorry, you are muted and can't hear you.
Sorry. Well, thank you, Mo, for that comment. And I think Tunde touched on it earlier. I think all of us are committed to local people and local jobs. We do run an apprenticeship program. I think there is a lot more that we could do. It isn't something that particularly falls under my portfolio, but I think it's a joint responsibility. So I think it's certainly something that I need to take back again to lead member colleagues and think about how we can really encourage this and support it. I mean, there are challenges to it because of we're fully aware of them. The cost of living and there are challenges, but I think it's something that we must encourage and we must have, not least because I think as Councillor Ali outlined, it makes such a difference for people who actually live here and understand it, and it's part of their lived experience. So it is certainly something that I will take back to the wider group.
Thank you. There's the opportunity for perhaps the local councillors and the leadership to work on this under your leadership as a community lead member for community. Any other councillor wants? Okay, Tom wants to ask a question now. Councillor Tom Bennett.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering about the two youth participation officers which have been transferred from Children's Services, and if was there a particular sort of role they were playing in Children's Services? Because I just know Children's Services has gone through sort of significant cuts recently, and our local youth club, Elscourt Youth Club, has had to take a significant cut, which has really impacted the services they're able to provide. So yeah, I was just sort of whilst I absolutely agree that civic participation is incredibly important, I was just wondering what the compromise is on Children's Services.
Thank you. I'm happy to answer that, Councillor Bennett. In all fairness, I think they were responsible for youth participation when they were in Children's Services. So this is more aligning it with an overall, engagement piece. One of the things we noted in the past is we tended to do engagement for young people separately from engagement for the adult population. This is more of a way of saying, actually, we want to bring all groups together in order to see if they have an opinion. So ensure that all voices are heard. So they will still be running the Youth Council, the Youth Ambassadors programme, as well as various other youth participatory sorts of initiatives.
Okay, well that's helpful, and I think wherever they can sort of go into youth clubs and such like, and perhaps run sessions and really get involved. I'm sure the youth clubs would really appreciate that, and that's a good way of getting the youth of the borough involved in this sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillor wants to ask a question, as well as members of the community? If there is any other question, please raise your hand. If not, we will summarize this point. Okay, I can start. Okay, no further questioning on this matter. Just to summarize what we've just talked about and the points that we've agreed to take forward, the meeting is specifically about civic participation and residents' involvement. That was the main issue, or the main point for this meeting, and to make policies that do not discriminate And within that, there are 3 points that the lead member as well as the senior officer wants to emphasize, including understanding our borough, work with the community leaders and its other stakeholders, as well as evidence-based work to know the communities that are left behind or feel they are left behind. Another important point to mention is the citizens panel, and we had a long discussion about reaching out to 1,000, but I'm confident the communities team will be, if not doubling this number, will reach and pass their target. And I hope the COVID-19 will allow them, and both councillors and other members can also help in this sense. The local employment, creating jobs for local people, and creating talents and employing talents. If we don't have them at the moment, they are there, but just making sure giving them the platform and creating talents that will benefit our residents and our borough. And Councillor Ansar, the lead member, I've taken my question to the relevant leadership to talk about the community engagement grants and allowing specifically Black and Asian minorities in the borough to be given an opportunity to set up their own businesses, as well as help them with COVID-19 and reach out to them more, those who may not have access to the funding and or those who may not have access to the leadership. With that, Councillor will come back to me and the committee. And finally, work with local councillors, as the Councillor Mobile Chair mentioned, and other relevant lead members. And to the final point that Councillor Tom Bennett mentioned is the youth engagement and sessions to get involved with the communities program. On that note, we will I have just summarized that point, and we will move to the next item on the agenda. But I'm taking this opportunity to thank the lead member and the senior officers and led by Tunde and everyone else who worked on the program and this ambitious program, hopefully to be fulfilled, and to see the outcome of it before this scrutiny finishes at the next year, May next year. So thank you. The next item for this meeting is the homelessness. As has been mentioned before, this homelessness report has been in the report, and I thank officers in the beginning in July for giving this opportunity to scrutinize their work. But as I said, there were other priorities for that meeting, and we had to delay to this meeting. So thank you again for updating. And this is a strategy for homelessness and rough living reduction strategy for the next 5 years, 2020 to 2025. So the point for us is, and the committee, is to make sure that this policy is not set in stone, but it will be flexible, and the leadership will listen, as well as the residents' points will be taken on board, simply because those who have been homeless before, or those who are homeless now, and those who we can prevent to be homeless in the future will be listened and taking their points across. Now I would like to welcome to the platform the lead member or any other senior officer who wants to take this to point and give us a brief details. I'm sure members of the selection committee or anyone else who wants to ask a question have read, and we will straight to jump into the questions, but we will have at least 2 to 3 minutes or at least 5 minutes of introduction to this meeting, a brief introduction to this meeting.
Thank you, Chairman, and I do welcome a brief introduction, introduction given the time, and we've got officers still in attendance. So this, as you say, this strategy did go to the leadership team, but unfortunately it was bumped off. There wasn't enough time to scrutinise it, but it has gone to the leadership team for approval. So to a certain extent, it's coming to you for information, but your comments are going to be very welcome. I mean, really quickly, is that clearly we've got big challenges in KNC. We've got high average houses. We've got a lot of people, 2,300 people in temporary accommodation. We've got the ending of the no fault evictions of COVID coming up, and these are all going to give us challenges, which is going to be, and the problem's going to be exacerbated in the short term. The overall approach of this paper is that effectively prevention is better than cure. And for our homelessness and rough sleeping, and our strategy takes that approach by tackling really what the significant issues are for our budget and really being honest about it, so people understand that if they do go into temporary accommodation, they are going to be there for a long time. The chances are they will be out of borough, and that maybe it's better to look and work with them in terms of staying where they are or dealing with the landlords, etc., etc. So again, we'd like to look at how we might sustain tenancies, help convince landlords not to evict and incentivize people to move into the private sector rather than going into temporary housing with the council. So housing associations, again, are going to be a key partner at this. We're lobbying them both individually and through the G15 network to see if we can get the maximum amount of nominations that we can out of them, but clearly offering more people the opportunity to get permanent accumulation is going to give us will have a big impact on what we're doing. Part of the strategy is also looking at health and welfare and safety checks on the temporary accommodation to ensure we've got better quality. We have an objective to try and own and manage more temporary accommodation so we can be sure ourselves of the quality and standard ourselves and give a better percentage of TA than other within borough. So I'm just scanning through because I don't want to take too long. So we'll be starting for, really, I think I'll just say, look, let's take it to the paper. Dan, Director of Housing, is here if he wanted to just add anything to it. Otherwise, I'm very happy to go straight to questions.
No, nothing to add from me. I think let's go straight to questions.
Yeah, thank you. I will start the question with Dory Schmatzli. Councillor Dory, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've basically got two questions, sort of overarching questions on this. One is, it appears that during this COVID-19 period, we got more people off the streets. In the light of my understanding, and maybe I'm wrong on this, that we actually are able to get anybody, we have been previously been able to get anybody off the street who wants to get off the street, or who does not refuse to get off the street. What changed during this period that we suddenly were able to get more people off? So that's question one. So should I just leave it at that and ask question two after that, or
no? Please add the question two.
Well, the simple answer is that we contracted with hotels because obviously we were mandated to get rough sleepers off the street during COVID, and we did that. So we put them into hotels. Those that wanted to go into hotels, I hasten to add, and then we've been processing effectively those in the hotels in terms of their where their permanent or temporary housing would be, and some of that is out of borough and some of that is within borough. But we're just processing through the numbers. But yeah, we did so by contracting with hotels.
Could I just ask a follow up on it? I thought that we actually had sufficient accommodation, at least overnight. I thought nobody had to be on the street overnight who didn't want to be on the street, including that health. Don't we participate in some sort of accommodation in the West? I don't know.
Yes, we do. I know, but we're talking about the impact of COVID. I mean, we have our homelessness team are out on a very regular basis, and it's fair to say that we know our homelessness, our rough sleepers within the borough quite well. Exactly. And those we do support people within hostels. We have capacity to do that. So, but obviously during COVID, the numbers went up quite significantly. I think we had about 70 in the end, okay. And those were dealt with hotels.
Right. Thank you. So that means they all volunteer. We're happy to be taken off the street. Okay. My second one is this: obviously the very sensible objective of preventing homelessness. And we've spoken about housing associations as well. But I mean, how much can we actually do? Because I had a specific case in my ward where we still have time and everything, where the residents are actually in a private accommodation, not in housing association, but it's a private HMO, and they expect to be formally notified soon of being evicted I think in March or thereabouts, on the grounds of redevelopment of the building. Maybe bigger units, whatever that is, they're going to be evicted, and I don't think there's any reason why that can be stopped. So how can we prevent it? I mean, I've been in discussion with the appropriate officers about this, and I know what can be done, which I think you alluded to in terms of getting on the housing list and so on. But I just got the feeling there's not a lot we can do to prevent the homelessness. I don't know for definite if they will all become homeless if they get chucked out. The one who contacted me certainly is fearful And I just directed him to, well, I told him essentially what you just said, which is if you get on the housing list, or the council housing list, it'll take, it could take years before you get anything. And there's no one to talk to. There's a private owner of the property.
Obviously, and I'll let Dan come in on this one. But I mean, clearly, if somebody's about to have their house demolished, then there's no question of us obviously being able to stop that eviction. I think, but the first line is also that doesn't necessarily mean that the council could find you private rental accommodation and you could enter into a private contract with the landlord in order to do that. That would be discharging our homelessness responsibilities. So there are lots of different things. Dan, I just wonder if you wanted to elaborate on that.
No, I think that's absolutely right. In that particular kind of case, where the eviction from that particular property is inevitable, as you say, then what we would do, our prevention work would focus on finding a new private tenancy rather than having to have them formally declared homeless enough to take them into temporary accommodation, which isn't good for them or us. In other cases, of course, a tenancy will be at risk of ending for reasons that can be prevented. For example, to do with, if someone's suffering from an employment problem or an income problem, there are things we can do to make sure people are getting access to all the benefits they can get access to, that we can support people into employment and so on. I mean, a lot of this, to be really clear, a lot of this prevention work, to state the risk of stating the obvious, the further upstream you can start preventing the risks, the better the chance of success you'll have. So someone who is on the brink of being evicted for rent arrears is going to be harder to work with and help than someone who hasn't yet got to that point and who we could help with, for example, with employment support or benefits support earlier on. And one of the things that means is that we have to be working really closely as a homelessness service with all the other parts of the council and the wider public sector, including housing associations where they're the landlords, to have our kind of early warning systems on, if you see what I mean, because there are lots of contact points that people have with the council, whether it's through the kind of council tax department or the employment and skills department or whatever else, where we can pick up on those signals that someone might be at risk of becoming homeless. And we're doing this, partly because, as you say, it's the right thing to do for those households. It's partly the right thing to do for the council, and it also fits with our new duties under the Homelessness Reduction Act, which have a much greater focus on prevention. And what we're doing is not only kind of adopting this new strategy, but completely reshaping the way that the team works and the structure of the team in order to take that approach.
Okay, thank you. So it means that if this, maybe the recommendation to this particular individual would be to contact the council again, or contact the council now or very soon.
Definitely.
I think what I would suggest. Thank you. I think Dori, you've just summarized that point. And I think what I've suggested is to perhaps to take this meeting, this issue after the committee is meeting on an individual basis, and hopefully continue to talk about it in a way to resolve the issue with our residents. Councillor Greg Hammond, please, if you have one question, we'll appreciate it, or maybe two max.
I'm sorry, Chair, I've got two. One of them is on the covering paper and the other's on the substance of the strategy. On the covering paper, I wonder if the lead member could give me an assurance that that covering paper does not form part of the strategy in itself, because at paragraph 8.2, there's a couple of legal blunders in there on, I'll read bullet 1, supporting residents in housing need who are, quote, more likely to have protected characteristics. Bullet 4, continuing to explore the causes of homelessness with a specific focus on, quote, residents with protected characteristics. Well, that is actually a blunder on the Equality Act 2010, because 5 of the protected characteristics apply to every single one of us in this room. Age, we've all got one of those. Race, we've all got one. Sex, we've all got one of those, and there's 2 others. So that's actually, it's not an uncommon problem, but to appear, but I think the covering paper, if it's just a covering paper, it's a mistake, but it really shouldn't be taken forward into the strategy. I will say that the Equalities Impact Assessment document is a very good one, and it doesn't repeat the problem. So I'll start with that.
Thank you, and noted.
Can you also add your following question in the same time, so we can answer, the leaders can, lead member can answer to it?
Well, I don't think there's any further. The lead member has noted what I've said. So the substantial question, one of the hidden problems of homelessness is young LGBT people, which is mentioned in the paper. And when we were allowed out back in the distant days of 2019, I saw a play in which this turned out to be one of the themes. So what are we doing to address that particular problem?
Dan, do you want to elaborate on specifically for LGBT?
Yeah, so I think so some of what I said before in a way will apply. That finding ways, for example, through there might be routes through the community, as it were, that we can make sure that we're reaching out and that we're finding those early warning signals. Because as I said earlier, one stands the greatest chance of success in preventing homelessness if you can deal with things upstream. Obviously, a kind of a family breakdown reason, which might be kind of implicated in what you're talking about, is a common reason for homelessness, and sometimes you can intervene to try and help resolve the family breakdown. On other occasions you have to accept that that's happened and look to support someone into alternative accommodation. So we've got we would work with that with someone in that situation, usually a young person, to find them some kind of sustainable housing situation. Again, ideally, as we were saying before, not temporary accommodation provided by us, because that's not best for them or for us. There are some charities and housing associations who work specifically with LGBT people, and particularly young people, to that end. And again, part of the trick for us, I think, is making sure that we're doing everything we can to link up with them, because they'll be better qualified to handle some of those specific situations than us. But the other thing I guess I would say is that no two of these stories are the same, and that one of the things that we kind of take pride in the team, and no doubt can always do better on, is making sure that we kind of properly seek to understand the individual circumstances in each case, and not have some kind of cookie cutter off the self approach. This is an LGBT case, therefore we're going to do this, because actually each case will have its own dynamics, and we very much kind of take the people centered approach.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you. I will now call Councillor Tom Bennett to ask a question.
Yeah. Thank you, Chair. The first one's just a very quick sort of pedantic point. I think it's a typo in 3.4 where it says within 56 days instead of 28. I think it's supposed to be the other way around. So just maybe want to know.
Thank you.
No problem. But yeah, my question was on particularly the emphasis on working with sort of with partners, and one group of people who are very highly represented, sadly, in homelessness and rough sleepers are former members of the armed forces. And I was just wondering if we work with charities like Armed Forces Charity, but there's other charities that are involved in engaging those people who do have sort of very particular needs, and if not, then could we?
I'm just searching for my email on this very subject, which I got last week, which I inquired on as to whether or not we did have a programme for ex-armed forces. I just can't find it. Dan, have you got it? I've got a feeling we've got this already, but I would just.
I'm the same. I think rather than try and improvise an answer to that now, I think what I'd rather do is get back to you with an answer in writing, if that's okay.
Yeah, if that's okay. But I've seen an email on this, and I was asking, do we do this? And I think the first reaction was yes, but let's just check and then respond properly.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
On that note, is there any other councillor or members of the public who wants to ask a question about this topic of homelessness? Nope. On that note, I will summarize what has just been discussed, and I think thank you very much for everyone contributing, and specifically to mention that the covering letter will not be has been noted that not to be included to the policy itself, and also to look into each and every case individually, not because of its what is this, sex, what is race related, or anything else that can be seen as a discrimination. And also finally to to mention that this policy is for the next 5 years, and the leadership mentioned that they will be looking into it, although they have been decision has been made on it, but they will be taking the committee's policy suggestions on board, and hopefully the leadership will accept anything that we can contribute. At the same time, Councillor Kim Taylor-Smith will come back to Councillor Tom Bennett's question, and hopefully in writing will be providing so that we can get
armed forces. Yes,
the armed forces question right. And I think if I remember, or Kim, if you remember last year, 2019, and first meeting that I chaired as the chair of the Housing and Property was called at the time committee, I've raised the armed forces, the veterans' rights to be given an opportunity and not to wait into the normal council waiting list, and to specifically work with the Department of Defense and to ask them about allocation for homes. And it's not fair someone who went through war to be given to be told to wait just like everyone else. Their need is greater than anyone else. And if you recall that meeting, we had it, and we also added to the response that I sent it to you. So it's very important for those who have put themselves into the harm's way to protect this country and us, not to be looked after when they need our support. So, and I'm sure, and I do agree, the echoes of Councillor Tom Bennett talking about this issue, and it's an issue that has been ongoing for some time. Again, thank you, officers, and the lead member of the third time, I think hat-trick. If Chelsea was playing, you would have been 3-0 by now, but unfortunately it's not. So thank you again once for the third time this evening coming on board, and hopefully we'll move on to the final agenda item for this report for modular housing working group. And before we start this topic, I would like to thank the officers, and specifically officers who've been contributing, both Ryan and everyone else, but also a really huge thanks to Councillor Dolly Smatling for taking the lead on this and working on this modular housing for months. It's a report that I'm sure everyone has read, and it's a report that I would like him to give a few minutes of summary and take it to the leadership and hopefully learn from it and take the recommendation. Dory, please come to the platform and give us a brief summary of the report.
Thank you very much, Chair. I don't know how to put this, but I have looked into the face of the housing crisis. I've spent over 2 years on the housing-related scrutiny committee, and I've had briefings. The introduction to this report refers to the 3,300 households on the waiting list, with 2,300 in temporary accommodation. Our stock of rentable accommodation is 6,900, with housing associations owning another 12,900. The objective of this report is to determine whether or not the deployment of MMC, that's modern methods of construction, can help accelerate the construction and produce better quality of urgently needed housing in the borough. There are constant developments and improvements in this area, as I learned at the housing conference, which I attended early last month. Regrettably, circumstances militated against getting as far as I would have liked with this report, and so I emphatically stress the need to go to the next steps listed in section 2 of the report before we get a clearer picture of which way to go. There has been a development since the version of the report you have received, and I have withdrawn what was the third recommendation because I have the answer. In short, it was about the use of cross-laminated timber in construction versus steel. It is already not permitted in buildings above 18 meters, and that might be reduced to 11 meters in the current consultation that the government has out. From what we have found publicly available on the web, and I really have to thank the officer Ryan McGowan for this because he put in an enormous amount of work. So to produce what I believe to be the first one that is comprehensively tackles the question of MMC. In 2017, the GLA published a report that did not go as far, and there is one small report by a private company. Both are referenced in this report presented to you today. The subject doesn't sound sexy and appears to be obscure and or low profile. In fact, this is an exciting area of development, as was often repeated at the housing conference that I mentioned already. And I strongly recommend continuing to the next steps, not least to make use of the contacts I made with senior people, relevant people to the building industry and modular housing. There is time pressure. The council house building program has begun. Now is the time to finish gathering the information that will inform what we do. The bulk of the background work has been done, with many thanks to Ryan McGowan, as I mentioned. In terms of the recommendations, there is not that much more to do, and at the conference, I gathered more opportunities to progress this. By the way, I had already lined up a talk by a Camden councillor to be given, probably to the entire select committee, on an award-winning model housing estate there. Although this may not be directly relevant to modular housing, because I don't know if there is any on that estate. In short, it would be a great shame and a waste of the time already put in if this work would be put aside so relatively close to the end. And perhaps even if it doesn't become part of a working group, perhaps it could be considered by the committee, or it can be progressed in other ways. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Councillor, for your work over the months and for your time, and as well as officers who've worked with you. Yes, Councillor Greg Hammond, please.
Thanks very much, Chair, and I'd like to echo your congratulations and thanks to Dory for the excellent work that you've put into this over the last few months, and Ryan and other officers who've helped. My question was on the first recommendation, Bonchurch Road and Faraday Roads. I've been into both of those, or into at least a couple of those buildings. Are you saying that you think they are modular?
No, I'm not saying it. It's just they look as though they might be, and therefore the objective is to find out what they're made of. Because if they are of modular construction, then of course it's worth pursuing the subject with the builders, because they're private accommodation, I presume. If not, then that's it. It is only to find out what they are, because they look pretty good. But what is your opinion? You've been there. What does it look like inside? You've been to a couple of flats. I've
been canvassing in there actually, and I've talked to a lot of residents, and I was very impressed with it. I don't know what the tenure is. I think it's quite mixed, but I only saw it superficially, really, in passing. Are they modular? I don't really know what I'm looking for in modular, so I better not comment. But it seemed all right to me. But I noticed that Councillor Blakeman disagrees, and she's going to come on.
Thank you, Councillor. If there is anyone else asking question within the committee, I will now. Okay, Tom. Councillor Tom.
Yep.
Yes,
just a very brief one, Chairman. I've actually been corresponding with a resident, Redcliffe Ward resident, just this last week, who's an architect and is heavily involved in modular housing, including on a couple of projects in Richmond. And he's very interested in opportunities in Kensington and Chelsea as well. So perhaps I could make an introduction both to Councillor Schmetterling and to the lead member if they'd be interested in speaking to him. I think he's would be an interesting person to talk to on this subject.
Thank you.
May I respond, Chair?
Yes, please. Yes, you can.
Just brief to say that's very interesting. Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Of the questions that we need to explore, which is my second recommendation, is to look into the costings of this, because there's a volume below which it's not cost effective. And I've given 3 grounds. You've noticed there's got to be at least 1 or 2 of 3 reasons where the answer has to be positive in order for this system of building to be sensible for any of our projects. Now, the first of our projects, these 97 homes that are coming up, it's clearly not suitable because they're all very small plots. But this is worth considering, and there are various ways of exploring it. And if your architect contact can provide some insights that will also be useful. But I think talking to councils who've done it and we know where they are, we found some projects to talk to them, what it cost them, why they decided to go for modular housing would be, I think, also very useful.
Thank you. And yes, I think your offer has been taken up, and hopefully the lead member will finally respond to that. But I do not expect the lead member to give us a comprehensive response or answer to this. They will have the report, and we look forward to them getting back to the selection committee with their what they think of the report, as well as any recommendations that will be taken from the report. And before I give
Chair, sorry, you may have missed it, but I think the lead member put a comment on saying he would like to talk now.
All right. Okay. Well,
sure.
I will ask. Yes, I could not see the comment. I'm only looking people who would raise hands.
I will be very brief.
Yes, please.
And I only wanted to respond because I was going to respond in a positive way to the paper. And certainly as far as the recommendations are that have been given about looking at where this has happened in other boroughs and the particular developments, we'll have a look at that. I mean, we're sort of slightly ahead of you on this one because we have looked at it and we continue to look at it. And there are the issue with us in modular housing, and you've summarised it in your report, is at the moment, in cost basis, there's not really a great benefit, but in build time and in difficult sites, there are some advantages of doing it. And we've got one particular site which we've agreed terms to buy, which is quite complex. And there, I think modular housing would work for us in as much that the site itself is quite constrained and the ability to crane things in and put them down. So we are looking at it. On our second phase of new homes, again, one of the things that we will do is look at gridding to a design that we're already going in with a design for planning permission, but I think as a desktop exercise, it would be worth gridding to do that in modular homes and see what the results are. I think what we would expect to see, and as it says in your reports, we'll probably end up with more homes, but they will be smaller. And I think one part within your report is that, modular homes, are they things that are going to be popular with residents because they might find them to be, too small and cramped? And I think that's something we would have to look at, what type of homes is more appropriate as far as modular homes are concerned. But there's certainly going to be a saving in time. I think the other thing, just to say, where we've looked at modular homes is where we've got sites that we could actually put some housing on rather than see the site stand fallow. And again, the issue there is that it really doesn't work for anything unless you can guarantee you've got them there for 8 years, which is not really applicable as far as the borough is concerned. But I thank you for the paper on it. And we will be doing some testing on modular homes, which I'm very happy to come back and report on.
Thank you.
Could I just briefly?
Yes, please. Make it quick. Yeah.
Yes, I know. I agree with all that. And the question of size is another thing that has to be explored. But I stress the technology, the manufacturing technology is moving apparently all the time. Well, not every day, obviously, but it is moving constantly. And so perhaps outside this meeting, we can get together and discuss some sensible way forward.
Thank you. And I'm sure the lead member agrees. Thumbs up. Councillor Judith Blakeman.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I was surprised to see the Portobello Square development included in this report because they're not modular houses and they were built by Catalyst Housing after the Worthington Green development had been demolished. Interestingly, I will send round the link. There is tomorrow evening at 7 o'clock a Zoom performance of the Worthington Word, which is a report of what actually happened when the residents were told that they were going to be razed to the ground, rather like was originally proposed for Silchester, and thanks to Councillor Taylor-Smith, that was abolished. Sorry, I've lost my thread, getting old. But anyway, I mean, that's not modular housing. Oh yes, the other point I wanted to make was that the question of meanwhile housing, I did go to a seminar on the homelessness policy and we were told that meanwhile housing is not going to be permitted on the Oscourt or the Kensal developments, because the property developers are not happy with that idea, and they have a nasty feeling that if they were used for temporary accommodation, they'd never get rid of the tenants.
Thank you, Judith.
May I respond to? Can I briefly respond to Councillor Blakeman?
For all, it's your report. Why not take a last?
Thank you. Well, thank you, Councillor Blakeman. I think you've answered question 1. So all we have to do is focus on question 2. Are you sure it's not modular housing?
Yes, but I would suggest that you talk to Councillor Mason and Councillor Dent Code for comment.
Indeed. Thank you. That is another way forward. And for the record, yes, I have also, just like Greg Hammond mentioned, campaigned in there, and Faraday and areas that are in the Portobello area. And I think it's the property actually looks good and modern. I've also had some issues with the local people. So yes, I think it's worth researching and to the area and the types of building are there, and the property, are they good enough? Do residents appreciate? But again, to summarize this topic, the final one for our agenda, again, thank you, Councillor Dorish Martining, for taking the time, as well as the lead members. Yes, the reason you went for this is to find a solution, a lasting solution for 3,300 homeless households in the registry. 2,300 of them are in a temporary accommodation in and out of Borough. So to find out whether modular housing can be a solution, a lasting solution. You've also mentioned that you will planning to invite a councillor from Camden Council to have a talk at or to give a talk to the Housing and Community Selection Committee. Yes, the homes that we've talked about, Faraday and Portobello area Square, is catalyst homes, as has been mentioned, and we will be looking into that. And probably the best way to do that is to respect the local councillors and get in touch with them first. Our fellow councillors in Goulburn Ward, that's Councillor Sina Larry, Councillor Emerton Code, and Councillor Pat Mason, to probably find out more about the housing development in their ward. That will be the first way forward. And further connections has been suggested about the modular housing, and to meet with the experts, both the selection committee as well as the lead member, if they're interested in. And again, what type of homes, modular housing, and meanwhile space in the borough that can be beneficial. But then again, the time it takes, up to 8 years, is it worth having it? As well as the tenants who cannot be removed after the development is ready for that. I think overall that is an interesting paper, and I'm sure the lead member will, as he said, will do experiments on it and find out if modular housing can be used. That puts me to the final point of our committee. If there is any other business that worth considering, if there's anything urgent, I will allow one, no more than one, maybe maximum 2 if necessary, but one, please. And I'm sure Councillor, we have a Councillor Greg Hammond as well as Councillor Judith Blakeman, both of them. If you want to answer, Councillor Greg Hammond.
Yeah, very briefly, please, Chair. Something we missed at the last meeting when we were talking about the new developments. Obviously, the Kensal site isn't in stage 1, which has gone through. I presume it's not in stage 2 either. But it's such an important site for us. I'd like to ask the lead member if we as a committee could have a look at the SPD to review that, please.
Okay.
And obviously, we can then do the work out of committee. But I put the request down in public at this committee. Thank you.
Lead member, would you respond to that?
Well, yes, I think I just need to check the governance on that, because I mean it's not a council-owned site. It's a third-party development. I suppose that's not technically true. We've got Canalside House we own, whether or not that would or would not be incorporated in the development. So it's not a council-owned site. So that matter really comes under planning. So I'm just questioning as to whether or not that would be most appropriate for this scrutiny committee.
Well, why don't we just leave that with you to come back
I'll come back
to check and give us a response, please, Kim.
Thank you very much.
Just
as a general point, while we're just on that point, is again, I'll say this to the chairman, is that obviously your work programme includes things like Grenfell recovery and COVID recovery, but just really to record that obviously my portfolio for Grenfell is Grenfell housing. So as we had with the meeting last time with Mr. Laghi, is that if questions, we won't be able to respond to questions that really are outside of our remit. So I think we just have. I just would like to just record that. I always think it's important if people make the effort to come to meetings, they get a response. But if we stray off my portfolio, I'm afraid that's going to be quite difficult.
Indeed, thank you for that, Kim. And maybe you may not be able to answer questions that are not relevant to you, but with courtesy, maybe you could seek information on behalf of the committee and find out from your
or encourage the individuals to go to the relevant scrutiny committee and ask the question there. I think that's probably the easiest way of doing it.
Perhaps they like this committee so that we're doing very well and everyone wants to do a housing and selection committee. Since we're doing all good, I think that's a very good point to sum up. This is a wonderful selection committee, and I again thank you. We have managed to overrun tonight. Of course, I was expecting half past, but almost within even that measure, 10 minutes. And again, it shows that we are working on very hard for our residents. And I would like to thank all of you, the lead members, as well as the officers who have been up all this time, and any members of the public who are interested in this meeting. Our next meeting will be in December, and hopefully that will be a fairly short meeting than this one, probably within the time, if not finishing early, because we will have one or two item on the agenda, and we will give a thorough time. Again, thank you very much this evening. The last point concludes our meeting, and I look forward to seeing you to another meeting in December. Thank you all.